we're cognizant of everyone's time. We do appreciate all of you being here today. My name is Patrick Lee. I'm the School Finance Director for the State Board of Education. And we're excited to have this training with new business administrators or newer business administrators. And we appreciate all of you being here. Just a few housekeeping items that we want to go through. Number one is that we'll have an interactive discussion more this morning than what we'll be able to this afternoon. This is intended to be a training. We want you to be able to ask questions. I think we might need to mute someone on, sounds like, or hopefully that's not mine that keeps dinging. I guess we'll have to double check that. Sorry for that. But what we'll do, just so you know, this meeting is being recorded. So any participation, you will be recorded as part of that. We will have the chat. You could ask questions in the chat. If you want, you can raise your hand and we can have you ask a question directly to the person that's providing the training at the time. We do want you to be able to feel like we can discuss things and be able to have an interactive training together. We do have, that being said, we do have a lot to get through. So if we're not able to respond to all of your questions today during the time that we have, we absolutely will do a follow-up. We are considering a follow-up training piece as needed. And for anyone who wants to participate in that, for Brett and the audit team to have a bit more time. Normally in past trainings, they've I think taken the vast majority of the training itself. So we did want to include some other key aspects of school finance. And so if we need to break out some other training down the road, we can do that. And we'll be happy to help any of you and work with any of you on questions that you have. So let me just do a quick overview of our agenda real quick. Most of you probably have this, but we'll start out with financial reporting and UPEF's updates. That will be Brett Baltazar, Danny Davis, Dallin, I'm sorry if I'm mixing up your name, Punier, and John Palmer. I probably said your name wrong, Dallin, I apologize. I should know how to say that. Okay, the next will be a state education funding overview with Dale Frost. Although Dale is having some internet issues this morning, I think his internet was shut down, so we may move that to later in the agenda. 10:15, we'll have Utah Grants 101 training. Although we might, I need to find a place for us to take a break unless we all just want to power through 3 hours and no intermission. At 10:45, Pupil Accounting 101 with Kieran McInnes. And then 11:15, Minimum School Program 101 with Jake Houtrow, our MSP administrator. With that, why don't we dive right in and get going. Danny, I'm not sure if Brett will be a part of this one or it will be the full team, but I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you guys.
Thanks, Patrick. I really appreciate the introduction and appreciate everybody being here and responding to the request to come to the new business administrator, business manager training. Really happy to be able to present this for you all and hope this is a really helpful and advantageous training for you. Like Patrick said, we're definitely open to questions and would really like to hear from you as we go through this. That being said, we'll try to stick to the agenda. I believe up first we're going to have John Palmer and Dallin Penier. I still don't know if I'm saying his last name right, but I'll let him announce that when he comes on. So John, if you're ready, John and Dallin, I'll turn the time over to you to present your screen. So thanks.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dallin Penier. I have the privilege of going first in this presentation. And so I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm new here with USBE, and I'm the newest member of the financial reporting team. I actually graduated college in December, and so I'm still trying to gain all the experience that all my other colleagues have, as well as that I'm sure that all of you guys have. And so just ask you to bear with me here. This is going to be a very high level, or I'm sorry, high level is not the right word. It's going to be a very 101 type training. So I probably won't tell you guys anything that you don't already know. A lot of you guys have much, much more experience than I do. So we're kind of going to go over a 101 of, financial reporting within USBE. So if we could just go to the next slide. So our team specifically is the reporting team. And so we run UPEFS, which is the financial reporting system for schools. And as you can see on the slide there's other teams that do take care of other aspects of school finance. So just wanted to point out that we are specifically the reporting team. That's Brett, John, and Danny, and myself. So, all right, if we go to the next slide. And so here's a little outline of exactly what our presentation is going to be about today. After this, we're going to talk about the chart of accounts, a very high level view, 30,000 foot view of the chart of accounts. We will also get into reporting, like the due dates. We'll talk about AFR, APR, and budgets. Then we'll go into the basics of UPEFs. There is a little bit that we have to talk about the Utah Public Meetings Act, and the last slide will be just our basic contact information. So if we go next slide. And so at a very high level, each school or local education agency, according to our board rule, is required to record revenues and expenditures with a chart of accounts, a board approved chart of accounts. And so we'll go ahead and just take a few minutes to discuss the chart of accounts. If we could just go to the next slide, please. And so here's a basic overview of the funds. Now our chart of accounts is much more extensive than this, as you all, I'm sure, are familiar with. And so we have our government funds, basically, funds 10 through 49, our proprietary funds, that's our enterprise funds, internal service funds, and then the fiduciary funds, which are the trusts or custodial funds. If you go next slide. And so basically with the chart of accounts, there's, and I hope I'm not overstepping in my presentation, but there are just a few things with the chart of accounts that we'll go over that, for our basic revenue codes, our expenditure and balance sheets. And what you'll see is with your revenue codes, you'll have your groupings, your codes that you're allowed to use, which are your fund revenue program codes for revenues. For expenditures, you'll have fund function object codes. And then for your balance sheet, you'll have fund and balance sheet codes. And so with this, these are your function codes that go with expenditures. And basically a function classification code is a method or grouping of expenditures which are allowable within a chart of accounts. And so the 1000s are instruction. You have your 2000s, which are support services, 3000s, which are community and enterprise services, your 4000s, which are facilities and constructions, and your 5000s are debt services. So those are a basic overview of your functions. They are much more involved in that. If we actually look at our chart of accounts, then you will go ahead and see that. And that you can find that within our the financial reporting side of the USBE website. So we'll go to the next slide. And these are your object codes. They typically go with your expenditures. Again, that's fund, function, and object. And so we have, the 100 through the 800s, as you guys can see on the slides. And with those object codes, when you are doing your reporting, you'll see that if, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this, but, and this is with every code, that if you try to code something such that it is not within our allowable rules report, then you'll see when you go to make an upload or something like that, that you can potentially get an error. And typically you'll get some sort of a screen that'll tell you kind of what is going on, that it's not allowable, and so forth. Go to the next slide. And just in continuation with the chart of accounts, we have our revenue codes. And over on the right-hand side is just a little screenshot of what our basic revenue code chart of accounts looks like. You'll see the M left to the 1110. That M is important. That stands for minimum level of reporting. Within our chart of accounts, within each basically fund, revenue, program, function, object, and balance sheet code, with the M, you'll see that next to it. And again, what that means is that is the minimum standard for reporting. And so within those, you have the 1000s, you'll have a breakout of 1000s, but with some of the codes, and not all of them, you will see that there are codes found underneath the M, which it does allow you to drill down more and to report even at a more like highly, I would say, drill down level. But at a minimum, you do need to report what is the M. So if we could go to the next slide. And continue on with chart of accounts, we have our program codes. And again, these, as you can see, the regular basic program codes. We have our 1200s, which are our special education. 5000s are our state programs. The 6000s are the CTE programs. The 7000s are the federal programs. And again, if you can see that, you'll see the M next to 6000, 6015, and so forth. Those are the minimum level of reporting that does need to be done. If we could go to the next slide, please. And then here again is a screenshot of our object codes. Just continue on. As you can see, the M next to 161. Now I did want to point out, and I hadn't pointed out before, is you'll see the 160 non-licensed instructional salaries. That is header only. So that is not something you'll use. It is just to provide the subject of the object or the revenue code. And then below that are the ones that you will actually use, for example, 161. If we could go to the next slide. So on this next slide, you'll see a screenshot of what our balance sheet codes looks like. Again, I know this is very high level, or 101 maybe is a better term for that. But you will see with our with our balance sheet codes, it is the, when you are recording those, it goes the fund and then the balance sheet code. Our 8000s are assets, 9000s are liabilities, 9800s are the fund balance and net position or / net position. And so again, you'll see that screenshot just to show that it is much more in depth than what we are presenting. And so if we could just go to the next slide. So I wanted to take a little time to talk about mapping. And with our chart of accounts, we derive our chart of accounts from NCES, which is the National Center for Education Statistics. And so there's, at a very high level, they provide what a government for schools, what for education chart of accounts should look like. And then from there, that's where we derive our chart of accounts. Theirs will be all like your federal codes and so forth. And on our chart of accounts here at USBE, not only do we have those, but we have the state codes and so forth. And I know each one of you guys with your different schools that you work with, you'll have your own chart of accounts, which is even more drilled down than what we have. And so mapping will allow you to take your much more sophisticated reporting systems with your different revenue codes, expenditure codes, your funds, and so forth, and then map that to the USBE codes here. And it'll allow you, when you go to upload your different reports, it'll aggregate that data into the correct USBE code. And so some of the issues that we see when uploads are happening and they're getting rejected are incorrect mappings. And so, when you are uploading, part of the issues with and part of what we do on a frequent basis when it comes to uploads are diagnosing the errors. And so we'll first look at like our rules report. We'll look at mappings to see if something is mapped correctly. And part of our support here is to help you guys get everything uploaded correctly. And so yes, to go ahead and get to the mappings, you'll go to UPEFs, you'll go to your tools. There's a part for mapping, an account type, and then you can create the different mappings that work with the USBE codes. So if we could go to the next slide. And with the next slide, just wanted to have a brief overview of different reports that are important to each school, each local education agency. We have the July 30th budgets are due. It is an upload to UPEFs on October 1st. The annual financial report, AFR, and the annual program report are due. That is a upload to UPEFs. And that is something that we were recently able to help every one of you guys with. And so thank you for all of your hard work in getting those done and uploaded to us. November 30th is the audited financial statement due date, along with the federal single audit, if it is applicable. And that is sent to us. And you can see there's our school finance email. December 15th will be the indirect cost data. That is entered in UPEFs manually. No upload required there. And then December 31st is the deferred revenue submission. Again, that is a manual upload to UPEFs. And so with that being said, I know I probably am a little bit early with my time, but I did want to turn the time over to my colleague, John Palmer, and he will be able to present the rest of our presentation. So you have the privilege of hearing from him. Thank you very much.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
We can hear you, John.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I had to stop sharing for a sec to unmute, and now I'll be sharing again. Thank you, Dallin, for doing that. Dallin went over the chart of accounts, which is where we, it's the codes we use to submit these reports that you're looking at here. So for example, the budgets and the AFR and APR, those will be submitted with codes that you get from the chart of accounts. And actually, since we're a little bit early, I'll just take you to our actual website here and kind of show you around. This is the landing page for the chart of accounts. So how to get here. So if you're at the state board website, then you go to financial operations, and then over here in the program menu in reporting, that's where we'll be. And then if you come across the tabs here, you'll see a tab for the chart of accounts. Then you click on that. This is the page. So the first thing you'll see is an Excel sheet, and this is published and maintained by Brett Baltazar. and it'll just outline what has changed from these accounts from last year. So if you were to go in here, it'll show you what we've added or removed that is different from fiscal year 20 over here. To keep going, here's the balance sheet codes, the function codes, fund, object, program, and revenue that Dallin just went over. So if you click into any of these, you'll kind of see in more detail. Again, Dallin went over what the M means. That means if you have any revenue to this level, we would expect to see that in the uploads. See if I can find one that doesn't have an M. Usually revenues probably pretty much all have an M. Another thing you'll notice, some of these codes, you'll see a header only, which just kind of outlines the section that we're in, but you will not be able to use this code that says header only. So yeah, thanks for doing that. Overview of the chart of accounts. Let's see where we're at here. So the first thing, now that we have the chart of accounts, I want to talk about is the budgets. The budgets are very important to what we do here in public education finance. I would recommend that everyone become familiar with the Utah Code 53G, Part 7 and Section 3 on budgets. There's a lot of important stuff in there. I didn't want to list every single code on there in this presentation, but here's a couple that I pulled out. This is mainly just the due dates. So if we look at Section 302, it says before June 1 of each year, the budget officer shall prepare a tentative budget with supporting documentation to be submitted to the budget officer's LEA governing board. So before June 1st, you need to create a tentative budget and submit to your boards. Section 303 Section 303, this has both for school districts and charter schools, same date, and it says before June 30 of each year, a local school board or a charter school governing board shall adopt a budget for the next fiscal year. So that's the due date to adopt a budget, June 30th. And then to continue, Section 307, looks like I didn't include it, but there's also a section in here that says within 30 days of adopting a budget. So within 30 days of June 30th, you shall, oh, it's right here. Okay, so yeah, within 30 days of adopting a budget, an LEA governing board shall file a copy of the adopted budget with the state auditor and the state board. And that's us through UPEFS, the state board. Now, we do not send your budget to the state auditor, so you'll have to do that outside of UPEFS. That is not part of this presentation. This bullet point here, this within 30 days of adopting a budget, an LEA governing board shall file a copy to us. That's what we're talking about here in this line item. So this budget upload to UPEFS.
Hey, John.
One more code I wanted.
Real quick, we did have a question about budgets. How does truth and taxation affect these dates? Do you want to?
Brett, do you actually want to take? Yeah, go ahead and take that, Brett.
Okay.
Are you talking about the due date?
My assumption is that Alan is talking about the due dates. Yeah.
Okay.
So what happens with the taxation is that it does extend the due date for those LEAs, because typically what would happen at a district level, truth and taxation only impacts districts and not charters. And what it would do is it would extend that date because their district or their county wouldn't approve the truth and taxation until within the first 2 weeks of August. And so we have granted that extension to submit their budgets to us to August 15th. I can't remember the code off the top of my head, but I know that's what the date is. I can't remember if it's state code or board rule that we have that, or maybe both, that we have that in there, that they have to submit their truth and taxation by August 15th. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Brett.
Okay. Sorry for that, John. Continue.
Oh, no, thank you. Appreciate that. And I almost put that in here, but yeah, if Brett got it. I believe the due date is August 15th. I know you have, and again, I didn't want to put all the codes in here, but I think there's certain due dates where you have to go through the truth and taxation process. But yeah, so this within 30 days would turn into August 15th that we would expect to see that budget in UPEFs if your district's going through truth and taxation. So.
John, could I just say one more thing about the truth and taxation? Sorry.
Sure.
If your LEA is going to go through truth and taxation, please notify someone here at USB in the finance department, whether that be Patrick or Scott or me, or even anyone on my team. If you could let us know if you're going to go through truth and taxation, that saves us a huge headache, and we're aware of what's happening at your district. Thanks.
Yes, that's a good point. Let's see. Oh, I can't see the comments here. Okay, to continue on budgets, one more section I wanted to put in here. And yeah, Brett, if there's any questions, just let me know. I can't really see them sharing like this. The last section is 53G7, section 307(2). And it says the budget officer of an LEA governing board may not draw warrants on a school district or charter school funds except in accordance with and within the limits of the budget passed by the LEA governing board. I wanted to put this in here because this is probably the #2 audit finding that we see from school districts and charter schools. It's when the warrants exceed the legally adopted budget. So just wanted you to be aware of that. You know, if you think you're going to exceed that, I would recommend amending the budget and taking that to your board, and then doing the appropriate steps to mitigate this 307 subsection 2 here.
We have another question.
Let's see what we have.
We have another question.
Okay.
From Johnson. It says, if we do an amended budget, do we have to submit that through UPEFs as well?
So Jason, the answer to that is yes, you can. So in UPEFs, what will happen is everyone's required to submit it's called a original budget. That's the budget that you originally passed here that we're talking about with your governing board. UPEFs also allows you to submit a final budget at any point throughout the year, and all that will do is override your original budget. And you can do that to kind of mitigate these things, and we do that for transparency. So yeah, I would say anything material, I would probably expect to see that amended in UPEFs. Brett, let me know if that's your view on that as well.
That is correct.
And Jason, did I answer your question?
We don't expect you to, every time you amend your budget, to submit something to UPEFs. That's not the, from my understanding, that's not the expectation, but doing a final budget would catch that.
Okay. Yeah, John, that did answer, and Brett, we did an amended budget, and so I just was wondering how that all worked. So it sounds like we don't necessarily have to submit it until the final amended budget. Brett, from what I heard from you.
Correct. You wouldn't have to submit that until, we don't want you to submit everything that you change. We know that sometimes LEAs change things on a monthly basis. Some things they change it 2 or 3 times a year, but we wouldn't expect to see all of the changes until you submit a final budget.
Okay, thank you guys.
Yes, thank you, Brett and Jason. And I think those are the technical requirements. Just know that your budgets are out there, though. If there's something material and you wait till the very end of the year to submit your final budget, someone may not be aware of that information. So just be aware of that. Was there any more, Brett, on budgets? I think the next slide starts to move away from these. Yeah.
I don't see any more questions on it. You can go ahead.
Okay. Well, okay. So the next thing, which is also an upload to UPEFs, is so we call this the actuals upload. When you upload your financials to UPEFs, what will be created is the annual financial report, which is the AFR, the annual program report, the APR, and we'll also populate some other reports like your initial indirect costs, which we'll go over down here. So we'll go over these now and do a quick screenshot, but yeah, let's do that. So the first report, the annual financial report, this is just kind of a small clipping of what it looks like over here on the right. Basically, these are, so it's a big report. These are fund financial statements in UPEFs. And basically for each fund at your district or charter school, it'll show kind of a, it'll show assets, liabilities, and fund balance up top. And then right below, it'll show revenue, expenditure, and then a summary of that fund. Furthermore, along the left here, if you see, it's kind of in light blue, but it says instruction. So that's a function code. So it'll kind of, outside of these things on the left, it'll kind of group a little bit. So here on the left is instruction, which is function 1000. So anything you see here will belong to this function. And then it breaks down further over here to the object level. So right here is the object series 100s, which are salaries, 200s, which are benefits, 300s, professional services, and then it just keeps going on down from there. And again, that's by function. It's like we have a chat. It would be helpful if the function code would be included with the title. Okay. Yeah, we will note that. So you're saying function code over here, so you can see that right away. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Furthermore, on the AFR, what you'll see 2 years of actuals. So you'll see this third column is always what you just submitted for your actuals. So this is your actuals 2020. And you'll also see the final budget for 2020, and then your next fiscal year's original budget for 21. And then this first column on the left is your actuals for 2019. So it kind of goes actuals, budget, actuals, budget. And that just kind of sees time series. You can kind of do a quick glance and see what you're looking at. The next report, which is also it's generated from the same upload, is the annual program report. This is a fun report. Basically, what it shows is your beginning balances, and then revenues and expenditures and ending balances at a program level. Along the left here, you'll see revenues. Down below, you'll see expenditures. And then I believe there's a section at the bottom for other sources and uses of financing. One thing to note, here you'll see up top, I don't know, hope everyone can see this little bubble, but you'll see it says regular district programs, and then it'll have just kind of a hint here of what's in this column. So here it says program codes 1200 to 1295. So just know that anything you see here is aggregated, and this is kind of just a title. Some columns will have single program codes. Some will have a big group of codes in there. Yeah, so that's APR. Is there any questions on the AFR or APR report? I'm sure everyone's, hopefully everyone's taken a look at those by now. Keep moving, just let me know if there is a question. So we've done chart of accounts, budgets, AFR, and APR. All these things, if you recall from this slide, are done via uploaded the UPEF system. So I wanted to go over the UPEF system now. UPEF stands for the Utah Public Education Financial System. No one ever says that. Everyone just says UPEF. Here's the direct link to this. So we'll post these slides somewhere if you're not aware of the link yet. So I'll go to the homepage where you can register for a new account or log into your account to view these reports, like the budgets and the AFR, APR, etc. Some account types available in UPEF. So the first account type is the LEA Business Admin. Basically, this is the do everything role in UPEF for your LEA. So this will allow you to submit, view reports, certify financials. We're working on some user management functionality as well that you should be seeing soon. The next role is the LEA submitter role. The LEA submitter can do everything that the LEA business admin can do at your LEA in UPEF except for certify the financials. So only the LEA business admin can certify the financial statement. The other role is just a read-only account. These are available to anyone, and you can see the AFR, APR budgets for any LEA. Here's a quick, here's a view of the kind of the landing page of UPEF. I'll go through each of these a little bit, but across the top you have some tools. You have the upload, reporting, tools to your LEA, and then this rules report I'll go over as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is this upload. This is the screen that you'll upload your data to us that we populate those reports from. There's not much to it. Basically, you're in your LEA here. You select the year you want to submit. You select what type, whether that's your budget, original budget, final budget, or your actuals. And then here you locate file from your computer and then you click upload. One thing to note is this file must be in CSV format. So you have to remove all commas because it sees the commas and moves that data to the next cell. It also will not accept anything with characters like $signs or whatever else may be in these files. So be sure to remove all that and then save it as a CSV. Down here is a template. This is, if you download this template and just fill in the rows from there, should be no problem as long as there's no commas or $signs. Yeah, so pretty simple. One thing to note when you upload, we've gotten a lot quicker over a couple years ago, but it still may take a little bit to upload. So just be aware of that. So yeah, down here at the bottom of the upload page is a download template button. And what it'll do is it'll show you this sheet, but there won't be data here. It'll just kind of give you the headers. It's really important to get these in the correct columns. So fund location, this is your school location codes, and I'll go over that a little bit more too. Program year, program code, balance sheet code, revenue code, function, object, and amount. These are the chart of account codes that Dallin went over earlier, and then J is the amount here. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is the reporting tab up here in UPEFs. The reporting tab is the second one here. Basically, the reporting allows you to download the reports that we discussed a little earlier. So the AFR, the APR, your budgets, or the school level report, school level reporting reports that populate the Utah School Report card. You can take a look at that here. Say if you click this report and you're in your LEA, you can kind of download and view. You can go back as far as you want, really. That's where that is. Moving on, this is UPEFs and then tools. So in tools, we have indirect cost tool, mappings. So Dallin went over mappings a little bit. I think I'll go over those a little bit more as well. Submission management, and then the deferred revenue tool down here. So for indirect costs, indirect costs could be a whole training in themselves, but this is just for the intent of this training. Basically just know that first of all, when you submit your financials to us on October 1, it'll originally populate much of the work and much of the data that we need to calculate your indirect cost rates automatically in UPEFs. And I think it was December 15th, which is coming up pretty soon. Everyone has to go in here into UPEFs and fill out these tabs. Each tab has some instructions, and you'll just basically go through them. So for example, here's the welcome screen here. Excluded cost review will show everything that UPEFs automatically excluded based on the chart of account coding that you submitted to us. So it'll just list those there for you. The next tab over, unallowable costs, is something that you have to do. So basically you look at the examples here and you'll list anything that the excluded costs did not catch in your upload. So if you have bad debts, contingencies, entertainment, fines, penalties, these are all things that have to be excluded from the indirect cost rate calculation. Our chart of account codes may not pick up some of this stuff here. So you would have to go in to your UPEFs tool, to this indirect cost tool, and list those out.
John?
Yes, sir.
Someone is asking, what if we don't want to compute an indirect cost rate for their district or LEA?
Yeah, so you can, Brett, stop me if I'm wrong here. I haven't worked with indirect costs too much, but you can waive this, I believe. Is that right, Brett?
Yeah, you don't have.
But I think you just get a zero.
Well, yeah, in our system, we would just put it as a zero rate, but we would notify, if you notify us that you don't want to rate, this may be a good opportunity to say, if you do want to rate, submit the information into the indirect cost tool by December 15th. if you don't want a rate, please notify us so that we can track who doesn't want a rate. And if there's that way, it tells us the feds are very, very strict on being, what's the right word? Proactive. They don't want us to come back and say, well, that LEA didn't have the opportunity to do a rate. We don't want that to happen. And so we have LEAs tell us one way or the other. Either they'll submit the data by December 15th, or they'll send us an email by December 15th saying that they don't want to calculate a rate for their district. So we need to be notified either way. I hope that clarifies that question.
Yeah, so basically you don't have to have a rate, but then you wouldn't be able to use an indirect cost rate. I think they would just be zeros. And if you're electing to waive the indirect cost rate, just as Brett's saying, just let us know so we can, file that paperwork and have that noted for the future. Brett, did I understand that correctly?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. So again, this indirect cost stuff is complicated. This could be a full training, and we probably should and will do this in the future. For the intent of this training, just know December 15th, and feel free to reach out to us. We'll help you fill this out. But just you'll have to go through these tabs if you're electing to do a rate and fill these out. This square footage by building, I can tell you you're allowed to do this, but I don't think anyone really does. I think it's a lot of work, and there's not a lot of benefit to my understanding of this. But again, if you do want to do that, feel free to reach out, and we can talk more about that. Maybe show some examples and maybe help you out with that. Unused leave, paid at termination, contracts and subawards, and then certify and submit. So these are the tabs you'll go through. Some of these are manual entries. A lot of this that's populating this was grabbed from your financial upload already. This is just kind of that additional stuff on top that we need to go through. What'll happen from here, once the LEA business admin has certified the indirect cost rates. So initially we'll do a review here at USBE, and then we'll actually have to send you via email an agreement that you'll sign in return to us. So that's the process for indirect costs. For this year, fiscal year 20, this will populate the rate for fiscal year 22, and the rate that's populated will combine this year and then another 2 years onto that as well. It's like another chat. Oh, that's Brett. Okay, so yeah, basically from this training, indirect costs, I recommend coming in here and taking a look at some of these things. You could change if you're a new BA, you can change this year up here and see what was submitted at your LEA in prior years for this tool, which I think would be a good benefit. And yeah, again, feel free to reach out. This is what we do. It's what we get paid for, to help out. And if you have any questions on this, let us know. Okay, so another tool. So if we come back to the menu, tools, this is now submission management. This is kind of just kind of a dashboard here, and it'll show you. So working from left to right, we have submission type. It'll show you what type we're working with, the date it was submitted, who submitted the submission, what date it was certified, who it was certified by. And then you'll have some options over here. Looking at this looks like a USBE account, so you won't see this decertify or publish button, but you'll see this download and log.
John,
We'll go over the log a little bit. Yeah.
we have a question.
Yeah.
Says, does the indirect cost tool have to be certified by the director, or does the BA just submit it?
Yeah, so the indirect costs will have to be certified in UPEFs by the LEA business admin role. And the LEA business admin role is reserved for the director, the executive director, or the business administrator at a school district.
So the same person that certifies their actual or budgets is the same that certifies the indirect cost.
Yep. And it's very important to take a good look at this indirect cost rate. It's the data that's submitted here will be, it all plugs into the formula that spits out that rate. So it's not something just log in and certify. I highly recommend taking a look. So that answer the question. We got like Brittany. Okay, great. Yeah, and submission management. Again, this is kind of a snapshot. Another good tool, if you go into UPEFs, into submission management here, let's say we want to go back to 2018 and download the file that we submitted to the USBE, you can do that from here. Just find, whether it's the budget or the actuals, come over here. If you hit download, it'll send, or it'll download what you submitted and what we use to populate all these reports. Another thing, some systems, right before so you do your upload and then you come here to submission management. With some systems, you'll need to hit this. It's kind of labeled a little funny, but it's inverted credit debit. What this will do is flip the sign of the revenues that you submit. So if you download your report and everything's flipped, you may need to come in here and flip this sign for that report. So definitely take a look at that. Let's see what else. This log button. So if you submit, and I'll go over this a little bit, I think it may be the next slide even. But if you submit a report and you get errors, this log button will show you the errors that you submit. So if you cleared the pop-up that said which errors there are, you can always come back into here, click this log button, and it'll show you the errors that you're working with, which may be a good segue. Oh, no, one more. This is we'll talk about the errors more in an upcoming slide. So this last report is under tools, and this is deferred revenue. This is similar to the indirect cost rate, where the UPEF system will grab a lot of this data from your upload already. If you notice down here at the bottom, it has balance sheet codes 9563 and 9564. This is state and federal unearned revenue. What we're asking from this tool is for you to come in and let us know what programs make up that unearned revenue. So an example here, so there's $29 million to balance sheet code 9563, which was unearned revenue state, I believe. If you come through here, you'll see all the programs on the left and the amounts that equal that number. So this has to tie. So these amounts that you enter will have to equal the balance sheet total from 9563. Once it does, it'll go green like this, and then you'll know you're good to go. Same thing for federal. You'll enter the program code, the name, and the amounts that represent your federal unearned or deferred revenue, which is balance sheet code 9564. This is a manual entry. I believe the due date for this is the 30th. Oh, December 31, deferred revenue submission. So we went over indirect cost and deferred revenue. These are both manual entries into UPEFs. And that is this report here. Again, we could maybe spend a lot more time with deferred revenue, but this is just kind of a basic overview of the tool in UPEFs, where to find it, and kind of what we're doing with it.
Hey, John, there's a question in the chat from Bradley asking, are these balances as of June 30th, 2020, correct?
Yeah, these are the balances that you submitted in your upload on October 1 from your balance sheet codes, which is for the period ending June 30. So if you look down here at this 9563, this is the balance sheet code that you submitted in your upload on October 1. Did I answer that?
Yes, you did. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. So a couple slides back, I discussed the log button in the submission management tool. Just wanted to say, when you go to upload, we have validations built into UPEFs. So what that means is you may submit a particular chart of accounts combination that is not accepted by the system. And what happens is when you submit an upload, UPEFs may give you an error, say this code's not allowed. Some of the errors may look like this. These are actual screenshots. So this first group here, these are balance sheet errors. It says Fund 10 balance does not match the revenues minus expenditures plus the 2019 fund balance. Other errors you may see are down here. This is probably more common here. It'll say the values, this is an example, the values 49, 4572, and 8050 used on line 1564 are not a valid fund revenue program combination. So how to read these errors. This first number, so you'll see two numbers. So you'll see this first 49 and then the one in parentheses. So the first 49 is your 49, and then the second 49 is the USBE fund. So over here, we're talking about fund, revenue, and program. So these are funds, revenues, and programs. What's in the parentheses is the USBE codes that you've mapped to. A lot of times when you see these errors, it is a mapping error. Many times the errors are just simply codes that we haven't added into UPEFs yet. Just because you see an error here doesn't mean we're not going to allow the code. It just means we haven't gone into the UPEFs constructor and added that particular combination yet. Another good way to diagnose these errors is the UPEFs rules report. Hoping that's the next slide here. Yep. So if you look at the UPEFs, this is the home screen. So when you log in, this is where you're going to land right here. And this button here, this is right on our alerts homepage. It's the View Rules Report. So if you download this report, it'll show you all combinations that are allowable in UPEFs at that current date. And again, there may be a combination that we're happy to add, just hadn't done yet. But when you download that report, it'll show you the rules for the expenditures, the revenues, and the balance sheet rules. this is what it'll look like. And basically you can just download, set your filters, and then download for the either say it's a fund error. You may think it's a fund error, revenue, program. So basically you can filter and see anything you see on this report is what is currently allowed in the system. So say, for example, you had an error. You submitted fund 60, revenue code 1515, and program code 5. And you got an error. You come in here and see what's going on. Well, it looks like we set this code as obsolete in the year 2021. So you wouldn't get this error until 22. Active year means the year you were able to start using the code, and the obsolete year means the year that the last year you were able to use the code. So you can think of that as like obsolete after 2021, for example, on this line.
Hey, John,
Yes, sir.
we have a question. And they're asking, is there a master upload? They're asking, is there a master upload file to import all the unearned entries at once? Currently, we don't have that ability. It would be a manual entry. At this point in time, we're looking at what we can add to UPES to make it more user-friendly. But that's one that's kind of been put on the back burner. But it is there. It's on our list.
Yeah, that's thank you, Brett. And that's a good question. We're always looking for ways to improve UPEFs. I think the goal is to not, one thing I will say on that, let's go back to deferred revenue. We don't need necessarily line items here. You can aggregate it a little. We would need just basically the total amount for down to the program code. So if you had, I don't know if this will save you any time or not, but if it does, we wouldn't need each individual line, just kind of grouped to the program code. But it's good to hear things like that. Like I said, we're always looking for ways to improve the system. We want to make this as easy as we can. So if you ever think of things like that, definitely let us know. But yeah, at this time, like Brett said, there's no kind of upload here. This tool is a manual entry for now. So, but yeah, maybe something to think about there. So thank you. So back to the rules report. So I'm just about finished. It's like maybe 10 minutes early. Definitely, I would recommend seeing where this is and being familiar with it. This report here will help you tremendously in diagnosing those UPEFs errors that you get when you upload. Another thing I'd like to maybe say with this is, especially if it's your first time going to upload one of these, I would definitely give yourself some time to upload, become familiar with the errors, how to diagnose, how to read them. What happens is when we get close to our due dates on October 1, we have just more questions coming in than we can get to. So it's really hard, but the earlier you get in there and start looking at these, the better. I know it's not easy to, put things aside for these reports, but especially if it's your first time doing this, the earlier the better for these reports when you submit. What you're looking at here for rules report is the revenue rules. So this is fund revenue program. If you think of this as a worksheet, the workbook, so you'll go down to the bottom, click the new worksheet, and that'll have your fund function object. And then the next worksheet over will do the balance sheet codes. So yeah, that is the rules report. Now, another field in our template was the location codes. So this is a newer thing to UPEFs. basically the federal government wanted us to start reporting at the school level for expenditures. So we're now down to the school level for expenditures. Here's Board Rule R277113-8. Says each LEA shall record revenues and expenditures in compliance with the board approved chart of accounts, and each LEA shall Section B, record expenditures using school location codes that can be mapped to official school location codes. Let me go back here to our template. Where'd you go, template? Here it is. So your location codes is going to be this second column here, column B. So these are school codes. You can get these codes from the USB eCactus system. If you need help with school codes, let us know. Just reach out. We're happy to get those for you. But you'll put those here in column B, and then for district level expenditures, that's not a school. You can put your district code there as well. Okay. Oh, look, I had a slide there the whole time. There's your arrow. That's what I was trying to find right there. Here's some helpful links. If this gets posted later, here's some of the things I talked about. Chart of accounts link. The allotment memo I didn't really get to. I think maybe Jake Houtro and MSP may go over that. The allotment memo will tell you which of the state revenue program codes to use, so that's helpful. Here's a UPEFS link, UPEFS registration. Here's a contact us page, and then here's a link to our YouTube channel, the financial operations specific, which this training may be posted to for future use. I'm not sure on that. And then here's a link to board rule. One more slide. Earlier I said the second most common finding was the where your expenditures exceeded the legally adopted budget. The most common findings we see are here from the Utah Public Meetings Act. So the Utah Code Title 52, Chapter 4 is definitely something that you'll want to go over. That's something that the state auditors are looking at, and definitely get familiar with these codes in here. This is just an overview. There's a lot more to this, but it'll go over the meeting public notice requirements, how to record and retain, the meetings and the minutes, and what to do in emergency meetings, closed meetings, etc. So again, this is our most common finding, and I guess it is what it is, but definitely be familiar with this title and chapter here on Utah Public Meetings. And that's all I have. It's like 7 minutes early. Again, we're learning as we go, and I feel like a lot of you know a lot more than I do. If you ever have questions, or if there's something, let's work together. Feel free at any time to reach out. We have a main email address here, schoolfinance, one word, at schools.utah.gov. Here's the contact information. So Dallin presented earlier, and thank you for that, Dallin. He just joined our team and he's doing great. Here's my contact info, and then Daniel Davis and Brett Baltzar, and we're happy to help in any way we can. So, is there any questions before we pass it along?
Can I take a minute, John?
Some chats. Sure.
Okay. I just want to thank everybody. Typically, we try to put this type of training together before October 1. And so I know a lot of you had a big learning curve going into this October 1st submission with your actual data, not knowing any of this. And I apologize for that. This year, as I'm sure it has been for everybody, has been just crazy. And so we tried to get something done in the summer, and it just didn't work out. And so we apologize for that. We hope that we can continue to work with you guys on an individual basis. Feel free to reach out. There has been some discussions that we are going to do an intermediate training, maybe more in depth on whatever topics you guys feel is necessary. I know one training, and I'm going to call Mandy out on this one. I think she wanted something about functions, a more in-depth discussion about functions and how to use them. And so it's those types of things we're more than willing to help you guys with. Don't be afraid to call us and talk to us and tell us we're wrong. I've been wrong before, so I'm pretty good at admitting when I'm wrong, especially when it comes to you guys reporting. So, and I really appreciate that for everything you guys do, and everything that you guys bring to light to us, because we work at the state level and you guys are in the weeds doing the hard work, and we're trying to make these various types of reports do, and it's good to have your input on everything that we do. So thank you.
Yes, I agree. And thank you, Brett and Patrick. I don't know if Dale made it back yet, or if he has internet, or if we want to.
Yeah, he's with us, and
Okay.
we're good to go there. I just want to double check, make sure we got everything in the chat. I believe we did. So as long as there's no other questions, appreciate you guys going through that part of things. I think we will now move over to our fiscal policy analyst, Dale Frost. What we might do after Dale wraps up is take about a 5-minute break and then jump right back into things. If you need to take a break for a minute, grab a drink or whatever. But yeah, for the moment, we'll go with Dale. Dale's going to work on an overview of state funding and legislation and a bit of the legislative process coming up. So we appreciate you being with us, Dale.
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Dale Frost, the fiscal policy analyst. And if you have questions related to the state budget, you can always contact me and I can try my very best to answer those. I'm going to share my screen. I think I can do that. So let's see. All right. Can you see that, Patrick? Let's see.
Yeah, that is coming up, the state education funding overview, first slide. Yes.
Great. Great. All right. So my two presentations are trying to give you a sense of what the state budget looks like for education, and then also give you some tools so you can answer specific questions about the state budget when it comes to education. And Patrick or whoever's watching, if you can let me know if there are questions that come up in the chat when I go through this.
Will do, absolutely.
All right. Two important organizations other than USBE that you need to know for the state budget are first the legislative fiscal analyst. So those are essentially the budget staff for the legislature, and the governor's office of management and budget. Those are the budget staff for the governor. And this is how the process works through a normal budget year. Agencies, including USBE, submit to the governor's office of management and budget their budget details and budget requests, and then the governor puts together budget recommendations that usually comes out in December, and that's the first official step of the budgetary process. Then it goes to the legislature, and the legislature considers a whole host of different budget recommendations and requests, and the final budget comes out and is passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. And the document, and I'll go into more detail about this, but this is a key document that summarizes all the budget changes that comes out of the legislature. And we call that the appropriations report. So I'll go into more detail about that. But here's a kind of an overview of kind of how the budget process works in terms of legislation. There's usually a base bill, and the base bill typically contains what was appropriated in the year before for ongoing. Any one-time funds is taken out, and that is kind of the base upon which budgeting occurs. And the base bill usually passes early in the legislative session, and most of the discussion occurs about what to add to the base bill. And there's usually a public education amendments bill, and then there's a bill of bills to wrap everything up at the end. One of the changes last year, so the Executive Appropriations Committee is the legislature's governing body when it comes to the budget. They actually added enrollment growth to the base bill, so we didn't have to add that. That was a new thing that happened. And then this year, you're all aware of Constitutional Amendment G that passed, and there was some legislation that was contingent upon that. And so there will actually be an inflationary impact adjustment to the WPU as well as enrollment growth as part of the base bill going forward, which is good news for the education budget. Now, this is a comparison of a normal budget year versus fiscal 2021, which is the current budget year that we're in. And so COVID has impacted everything, including budgeting. And so we had a normal budget process through last legislative session. House Bill 1 was the base bill. Senate Bill 2 was the public ed amendments bill. And then there were changes in House Bill 3. And as you remember, there was a lot of positive changes for education funding. There was a 6% increase in the WPU, but that had to be rescinded because of COVID, which had serious impacts to state revenues. And these are three, and they're not the only ones, but the major bills that had to do with changes to the budget due to COVID. And as an aside, if you see any bill numbers that are in the thousands, that means that it's part of a special session and not part of the general session. So Senate Bill 3001 was part of the third special session, and I'll show you how you find these. House Bill 512 was part of the fifth special session. House Bill 612 was part of the sixth special session. All of those contribute to what is now this year's budget. I'm going to go over some data to kind of give you a sense of where the money comes from and where it goes. For the revenues reported to LEAs, just over half of it comes from state resources. Only 7% comes from federal resources, and the remainder comes from local resources. Some of that is mandated or required by the state, which is the local state budget, and then others are raised purely at the local level through property taxes. Let me move on how those funds are utilized. As you can see, of the $7 million reported in the annual financial report, that's kind of going back to some of the reports that John was talking about beforehand, a little more, well, almost a little more than 60% is salaries and benefits that is utilized by local education agencies. The next biggest piece has to do with capital and property. I also wanted to show you on the right-hand side, this is just the state appropriated budget items. The vast majority of that is passed through, which means that very little actually gets spent at the state level. Only 3%, 97% is passed through, that's received by USBEs, passed through directly to LEAs or through grants. So this kind of can show you over the last 5 years how funding has changed for public education. So total funds has moved over the last 5 years from about $4.5 million to $6 million. And then the general general funds and the education funds is about from $3 to $4 billion. And I'll kind of go into that in a little more detail. The largest piece of that fund, of those funds, is the minimum school program. And you don't have to memorize all these numbers. I'll show you where to find these tables here. But what this table shows you is fiscal year 2020 and what was appropriated for this year, 2021. And I'm just going to focus on 2021. This is the revenue side of the minimum school program. You'll see that the vast majority of the $3.2 billion that are part of the minimum school program come from the education fund, $2.6 billion. The next biggest piece comes from the local revenues, the biggest of which is the basic levy. You'll see that local revenues, and so these are property taxes, generate about $557 million. So that's the revenue side of the minimum school program. Here's the spending side of the minimum school program. So the biggest piece is called the basic school program. And this provides WPUs to local education agencies. And you'll see that the biggest part by far is the grades 1 through 12 program. That's $2.2 billion, and that provides WPUs for every student who are enrolled. And that is based on the prior year ADM or the October 1 count if it shows growth. The other big pieces of the basic school program are special education. And then there are some other smaller programs that round that out. And so that's $3.2 billion. That is the biggest part of state funding by far, and education funding in general that goes to schools. You may hear, you see this says the line, you see here it says the line. The basic school program, if you hear the term above the line, basically means spending in the basic school program. Below the line means spending in the other two line items, which are called the related to basic program and voted and board levy programs, and I'll get to that in just a second. So for related to basic program, there's $918 million that was appropriated to relate to basics. So these are all the other programs that are more categorical that go to LEAs. And all of these sources come from state funds, whether restricted or unrestricted education funds. And so this is the spending side of the related to basic program. You'll see it's a whole host of programs, from transportation to charter school local replacement to EARS, that enhancement for at-risk students. So a lot of the lines in your allotment memos are in the basic school program or related to basic. So I don't know if there's specific questions about those programs, but that hopefully if you have changes or things that happen to a program, looking and seeing what happened to the minimum school program would be probably the first place I would start. And so this is the second part of the related to basic program. So the other section, so sorry, going back, you have some of these general programs, and then you have focused populations. So these are funds that go to serve specific populations of students. That's the second category of programs. The next one is educator supports. The biggest by far is the educator salary adjustments program. Next is the TSSP, the Teacher Salary Supplement Program. And then there are some statewide initiatives as well. And that's the last category of programs. That includes things like Beverly Taylor, digital learning, dual immersion, and others. And so all of that together rounds out the related to basic, which was that $918 million. And the last big piece of the minimum school program is the vote and board local levy programs. And this affects only school districts. And this is a guarantee program from the state that guarantees certain revenues for WPUs if local districts will levy certain property taxes. And the total revenues for that program and expenditures are about $860 billion. Again, I know that's a lot of numbers that I threw at you, and that's why I'm going to go to the second part of my presentation about how, when you have specific questions, how can you find information for yourself? But this is my contact information. If you guys have specific questions about the budget, feel free to send me an email, and I would be happy to answer those questions. So I'm going to stop at this point and see if there are questions in the chat about education funding in general at the state.
Dale, at this point, we don't have any questions in the chat. If there is anyone who has a question, you're welcome to ask that now, or you can continue on throughout your presentation and still have some time at the end.
Great. So I'll move on to my second presentation. I might have stumped everybody. So, all right, let me share this part. Okay. Can you see that, Patrick?
Yeah. How to find pertinent information.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of times when I have a BA or somebody else who wants to find specific information, I often kind of walk them through this exercise, and I've heard multiple times it's very helpful for them just to know, oh, I wish I knew these resources or how to find these resources. So I thought it would be helpful for you all, for me to walk you through that, go through a couple examples, and so that you can try to answer your questions for yourselves. And then you can always reach out to me too. So if there's one thing I'd have you remember from all of my presentations, it's if you have a question about the state budget, go to budget.utah.gov. It's very simple, budget.utah.gov, and I've worked in multiple states, and I have to say that I think that the budgetary information here in Utah is by far the most accessible and the best presented. So so when you go to budget.utah.gov and you scroll down, it will show a number of different products that they show. And I'm going to go through some of these products with you. So the first one is called the COBE, the Compendium of Budget Information. And I'll go through how you can utilize and scroll through. And it's a little confusing at first, but once you get used to utilizing the COBE, that's probably the best source of information. Second, I would go to this, that's the full budget of the state of Utah, is that appropriations report that I mentioned before. And then if you have very specific questions or want to look at actual legal language about bills, then you can go to the appropriations bills, and I'll show you how to read a piece of legislation to as part of my presentation. So first, going to the COBE. If you click on that fiscal 2021 session, make sure you're looking at the right session. So this is what will come up. And you'll see in the top left-hand corner of the page, there's this navigate function. So when you click that navigate function, it will bring a drop-down menu. And the budget is organized by subcommittees, and the one that you're probably going to want to look most closely at is called the Public Education Subcommittee, no surprise. And I just spent in my last presentation going through the minimum school program. You'll see that there are 3 line items there that I just kind of went through the numbers for, the basic school program related to basic and voted and board. So that's kind of how you scroll through. You need to make sure you click navigate, go to public ed. You need to know what line item and program you're looking for. Once you click on that, on a program, then this is what comes up. And so, for example, I went to the basic school program and I clicked the grades 1 through 12, or basic school program, which is the line item. And the program within that is grades 1 through 12, which is the biggest part of the basic school program. You'll see underneath that there are 4 tabs: overview, issues, background, and financials. Each of those are very important, and depending on what you want. So the overview obviously gives you an overview. The issues will give you the changes made for that program. The background shows you multiple years of history on what happened during different sessions, and the financials will show you the financial information. Right here is an example of that. So it actually breaks it out by expenditure category and funding source per program, and it provides a lot of good information that way. So here's a screenshot of the issue side. So for a specific program, or even if you're wanting to look at the entire subcommittee, it will show you all of the issues that were prioritized, funded, and requested. And I'll kind of go through an example on how you can find that and see that. So let me do that. Okay, I'll walk through the appropriations report first, and then I'll go to my browser and show you a couple examples of how you actually can use these resources. So in budget.utah.gov, the next part is full budget of the state of Utah. Again, that's the appropriations report. It's like a 650-page document. And so just so you can navigate it, again, the appropriations report is organized by subcommittee for appropriations subcommittees. And the public ed starts at section 7.1, and that's where you'll want to go. This is kind of a screenshot of what the beginning of the subcommittee overview looks like. And it's organized in this way. It gives you an overview of total funding, and then it will give you the changes for the general session and any special sessions. And then it breaks down by program and provides some really useful narrative about different budgetary changes. So if I can't find something in the COBE, I usually go to the appropriations report. And you know those very useful tables that I showed you before? Those are all in the appropriations report. So that's where you should go if you have questions about that. So let me now go to, I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint presentation, and I want to share my browser and actually show you a couple examples. So I'll share that. Patrick, can you see my browser? And should I expand? Is it big enough? I don't know if it's really tiny.
Yeah, we can see the browser. It might help to a bit if you're able to, but I mean, for the most part, we can see it. It's a little bit smaller text, but
okay, let me see if I can.
That helps.
Let's see. Does this
Yeah,
help?
that's good. Yeah, that does. Yeah.
Oh, oops. Okay, come on. All right, and then I'm going to.
Yeah, that worked. That's.
Is that better?
Right there. Perfect.
Yes. All right, good. So again, this is budget.utah.gov. If you go to the legislature's website, which is le.utah.gov, you can get there just by clicking the budget tab. So as you know, if you're curious about the state of revenues, and in this COVID era, revenues are very uncertain. I mean, what I did to present to the board about revenues is I clicked on this read article here, and I read about what's happening with the November revenues. And then underneath here, they have these different reports. And here's a revenue snapshot of the different state revenues. The education fund is right here to find out that, you know, here's a line here for education fund that's really important. So if you have questions, so we have so far collected $2.053 billion, and the projections were between $2 billion and $2.3 billion. So we're on target, but we're kind of on the low side of the target. I'm just showing you examples of things. If you're interested in revenues, that's a good place to go. And then going down, this is where I showed you the different products. So I'm going to go to the COBE. All right. And let's say, for example, people want to know, okay, I just want to see what happened with the budget, or I'm looking for a specific change in the budget. I often go to, so I clicked public ed, I go to public ed summary, and there are those 4 tabs. If you click issues again, this will show, and it was messing up before, and I'm kind of bummed I have to call them. It should show all the different changes to the budget. Right now, it's not working very well. So this is frustrating, but this is how technology goes in real time. I apologize for that. Let's say, yeah, that's not showing everything, and I'm not sure why. I apologize for that. I know I've had some problems with that. So going through, here's the overview for the state budget. Issues should come up. There should be a whole list of, 50 to 80 different changes to the budget. And then here are the financials about where the funding sources, just a different way to look at funding sources for the state budget. Let me try to go through an example though. All right, so I've been working with a work group on the Special Education Services Program, Intensive Services Program here. Let that come up here. So this would show you, this was a program that was defunded in the 5th special session. And you can kind of see that it had, $2 to $3 billion or $1 million appropriated for that program. And again, yep, we're not seeing the issues. If this was working properly, you could click on that and show that the 5th special session, this was defunded. So I apologize for that. Let's say, for example, that you, one of the things, if I was planning on showing you if this was working, if you just wanted to see what was the WPU value increase, so how much did they increase the value of the WPU in the last year, you could, if you looked at issues and you sort by ongoing and go down the list about biggest issues, you'll see that in the 5th special session, there was $68 million appropriated to increase the WPU value. And there's some explanation of that, but they don't actually give you a percentage increase or the actual value. And so the way you would find that out is you can go to the appropriations report, and I wanted to show you that. And that's just a PDF, so luckily that's working. Let me find the beginning of, okay, so here again, it's a long drawn out report. Sorry if I'm making your brains hurt.
Yeah, we'll
Right
need
here.
to wrap up in just 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay, because I thought I had till 10:15, but
we need to start up with Rebecca at 10:15.
okay, so I will wrap up in just a minute and then answer any questions.
Okay, yeah,
So,
and maybe take about a 5-minute break.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just 2 more minutes and then I'll be done. So here, this is the picture of the appropriations report. It's actually buried down, if you're looking for the WPU value, much lower because there are all those different special sessions. So if you're looking for something specific, what I usually do is I just search for it. So if you look for WPU value, right, and let that come up here. So we'll go, not that one. Oh, here we go. All right. Yep. So here it says legislators appropriate $60.4 million to increase WPU value by 1.8%, changing the value from 3532 to 3596. And then they actually have a breakout of what that is by program. So this is the kind of information if you're looking for, well, what is the WPU value for this year? There's an example of how to find that. Those two are really helpful pieces of information. Let me just very quickly show you how you would find a bill. So if you go to bills here in the legislature, you saw the different special sessions, right? I'm going to show you, let me just bring up any kind of bill so you can see how you can read that. So a bill here will show you the sponsors. There's a fiscal note piece here that's really important if you want to know what the monetary impacts of a bill are. And then there's underlined text that's added and stricken text that is taken away. And the last thing I'll say is if you're adding new code, it's called a section. If you're adding a budget, it's called an item. So there's a lot more information I can go through, but hopefully I can give you an idea of how to utilize the legislature's website to answer legislative questions related to the budget. So with that, I will stop my screen share, and that's what I had planned to present.
Great, thank you, Dale. I don't see any questions in the chat, so unless there are other questions that anyone would like to bring up now, we'll go ahead and we'll take about a 5-minute break. I know that's a little less than it showed on the schedule, but yeah, we'll come back at 10:15 to start up with Rebecca, and we'll keep going. Hope that's okay for everyone. Thank you, Dale. I appreciate your presentation, sir. Okay, I know that 5 minutes went by really quickly. We appreciate all of you sticking with us here. Hopefully you're able to get a drink or bathroom break, whatever. But yeah, we better jump back into our schedule here. We have 3 more presentations on Utah grants, pupil accounting, and the minimum school program. So would like to turn the time to our grants manager, Rebecca Nielsen, to go over some Utah Grants 101 training. Rebecca, looks like your screen's up and running, so you're good to go.
Hey, everybody. Okay, thanks, Patrick. You can see my slides, yes?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, we'll just dive right in. Feel free to interrupt at any point with questions that you have along the way. Or Tracy, if you need to back me up, feel free to chime in. Utah Grants is the electronic grants management system utilized by the Utah State Board of Education to manage our grant life cycle from cradle to grave. So from the beginning of the program all the way through applications to reimbursements to close out. Also, award generation is in there as well. So this is the system that we will utilize for any grants that are coming through the state to our LEAs. So that would include federal, state, MSP, any grant funding that is flowing through. It does not include any contracts. So if you are contracting with USBE, the contracts are not included within Utah Grants Management Solution. Couple resources wanted to show you. John hit upon this one also, but I wanted to show you where you would find any training or resources as it relates to Utah grants. So I'm just going to actually pop out there and show you on schools.utah.gov's website. You will see that there is a tile for financial operations. If you click on that, you'll see all of the resources that, not all of the resources, many of the resources that you need. If you click on the Utah Grants under the program menu, you will see all sorts of training materials that you will need to answer questions in Utah Grants. There's screenshots with step-by-steps on how you complete things within the system. There's also a link to Utah Grants right here. So this is usually a really good first place or first resource to go if you have questions about how to do anything technically within the Utah Grant system. I will also show you at the end of my slides how you can get a hold of my team if you have direct questions, and you can always reach out to me as well. This again, here's another link to the Utah Grants login website. Just one thing to note, it doesn't show on the screen, but if you do happen to forget your password, with Utah Grants, right now our reset password link is not working. So if you will call my team, we can actually reset any passwords on our end until that is working again. But if you have any trouble logging in, please reach out. Wanted to talk a little bit about roles within Utah Grants and who can access Utah Grants and what you can perform. There are 3 main types of user within the Utah Grant system. There is a creator, an approver, and a key point of contact. So typically speaking, creator can do everything within Utah Grants except for submit. They can submit an application, they can submit a payment request to the LEA approver, but it will not come to the Board of Education. So the creator can actually go in and do the legwork, but they can't actually approve that before it comes to USBE. So within Utah Grants, there's always 2 steps before anything gets submitted to USBE. There's a creation and then there's an approval. So you'll want the separation of duties, the first being the creator, the second being the approver. Just as far as role sharing goes, approvers can also create, but they cannot approve their own work. And the key point of contact within the LEA is the default approver, but they can also create and send things to a different approver within Utah Grants. This talks a little bit about the life cycle of the Utah Grants Management system. So from the USBE perspective, we will start by setting up any programs or announcements as they are funded. And then we will issue an application for the LEA. The majority of our applications will come through as a formula grant, so we will predetermine the amount that is eligible for your LEA to apply, typically by WPUs or another eligibility criteria such as low-income students. So we will submit those applications with the formula allocation to you. We do have a couple of competitive applications. Those are very few, but there's some instructions on our website about how to apply for a competitive announcement. Once the application comes back, the USBE will generate an award for the LEA, and all of this award information is kept within the Utah grant system. I'll show you where you can find all of that. Also, this is where you'll come to submit reimbursement requests, and any post-award management would also be done here. So reporting, for example. A couple of key things within the grants management system. Typically, you're going to want to start at the top of the screen. So this little circle here, the screenshot shows opportunities, applications, grants, and monitoring. You're going to want to pay attention as you log into Utah Grants as to what you're coming into Utah Grants to perform. I will show you a couple of new dashboards that we have since this slide was created, but typically you're going to want to think about putting on the hat that you're wearing. So if you're coming in to complete an application, you're going to want to put on the hat of applications and click on applications at the top before you do anything on the left pane. So the left pane is driven by whatever you've clicked on the top. So for example, if you want to know what application pending tasks you have, you will need to go to applications pending tasks. We have some new dashboards that really help this so that you know if there are pending tasks sitting in each of these modules, but getting in the habit of putting on the hat as to what you're doing when you come into Utah Grants is a good habit. A couple of just key actions and icons. One key point I wanted to mention is to save often. Timeouts do occur, and we don't want you to lose any work. And also when you're switching between screens, you may also lose some data that's been entered, and we hate to have you redo any work. So just as a good habit, save often while you're in the system. Also, sharing rules. As soon as you own a record, so if you own an application or if you initiate a payment request, you are the owner of that record, and you will need to manage that through submission to USBE. You can call my team and we can reassign those if you have an individual leave or something happened that something was owned in error. We can change that on our end, but just know that you can see records, but as far as owning the application or the payment request, you'll need to make sure that the owner is the one that is actually completing that work. A couple really handy search functions. So there are a few ways to search for things within the Utah Grant system. So first way is the global search, which is on the very far left pane. You can use any keyword to search there. If you haven't tried that, it's a fairly new function. It's always been there, but it hasn't always worked. So you may have tried this early on. Go ahead and give it a try again and try to do some searches with the global search. What I typically do when I get into Utah Grants is use the quick search. So if I am searching for an opportunity, I would go to this opportunities tab and utilize this quick search. At that point, it will pull up anything within the lower, the table related to any of those keywords that are in that search. There's also some pretty cool filtering functions. If you click on this filter, you can filter anything that's in the table below with contains, doesn't contains, equals, any of those operators. And that's a nice way to filter things in Utah Grants as well. A couple questions. Okay, so Kim, why are we not using the state chart of accounts in order to name our grants? That's a great question. We are using the state program codes. It's the funding source in Utah Grants. And we have been asked if we can switch those to the state chart of accounts. And unfortunately, the way it's been set up is we cannot change that. I'm going to show you in Utah Grants where you can find those chart of accounts, but unfortunately, we have to use that program code or the funding source in our naming conventions. Marianne, we're always wearing all the hats. Could there be a landing page? Yes. In fact, let me pop out and show you that landing page right now. In the Utah Grants, if I am just logging in, this is the landing page that you will typically go to, the home menu. I believe this is where everyone will land as soon as you log into Utah Grants. This first dashboard is actually a really helpful dashboard because it shows you your pending tasks by phase. So if you want to find out what pending tasks you have across the board, look here. You can see that this user has one pending task in applications and one pending task in grants. And you can actually hyperlink right there by clicking on the number. Anything blue in Utah Grants is a hyperlink. So if I just clicked on the one under grants, it would take me directly to that pending task. So there's a budget revision that's due for this program. You could get there by going to grants pending tasks, or you could do it directly from the home menu. One other piece I wanted to point out that can be confusing is this task summary by due date. This can be misleading. In Utah Grants, a due date is 7 days after the task is created. So applications may have a longer period of time which you can apply. It could be weeks, it could be months. It's still going to show up in your tasks as late if it's over 7 days old. So just pay attention on your application due dates. Just because they show in a late task doesn't mean that it's necessarily that the pending application deadline has passed. So you'll really want to pay attention to that. I actually believe if you click on applications, it should be right in the table here. So application deadlines will show, if I just click on applications, it will show all of the programs, the status of that application, and the due date. Here you can see I have a little downward arrow. I have previously sorted on this column, so you can see that that's where the arrow is. But if I click on any of these column headings, you can sort either ascending or descending. If you just click it twice, it'll toggle back and forth. So this shows me the most current or the upcoming application deadlines at the top. So you can also do the same with any of these headers. Okay, Kim also mentioned in the filter that you can filter by year, so that may be helpful as you're looking at funding by year. So thank you, Kim. Keep bringing on questions. Oh, I skipped Marianne's. Can we hide archival information because it's really cluttering up the space? Yes, there is a way for us to close out old programs and old grants, and we're behind on doing that. But as we close out those grants, they'll still be available to you, but they won't show on your main screen. So we are catching up on getting those closed out, and you should see those cleaned up in your space very soon. There's also a way, if you're looking at in some of the headings, you'll see this little, I hope you can see where my cursor is, a chevron. It's the 2 arrows pointing down. That's also another way that you can filter or remove some of the clutter within these tables. So here, if I want to see only active grants, I can click on that and it will show the grants which are active or closed or all of the grants. So watch in your headers for those chevrons also. That can help you to clean up some of the old. And I'm glad that we're to the point that we can start cleaning up some of the old, because it feels like we just turned this thing on. So this is good. All right, I'm going to pop back to the presentation. I'm jumping around just a little bit, so I think we've hit a few things, but we'll keep going through that. The types of programs that we have in Utah Grants are listed here. So the minimum school program or MSP program, there's nothing you need to do with those in the Utah Grants, but you will see those programs here. You'll see the record of the payments, the record of the award amounts. You'll see everything. You just won't need to do a reimbursement request. We do also have our MSPs that require an application. The application will be done here in Utah Grants, as well as the formula, which I mentioned, and competitive grants. They will all all be here. We have heard that some of our program specialists are issuing applications outside of the Utah Grants Management System, and we are strongly encouraging them to use the Utah Grant System to apply or have applicants, the LEAs, apply for all of the grants. So if you're being asked to complete applications, especially competitive applications outside of Utah Grants, let us know. Sometimes we have program managers that are just used to doing things the same way. We need to just kind of get them routed in, make sure that they're using the Utah Grant System so that we're all using the same tool. Kim, yes, we can filter by year. I'm sorry, I did not answer your question. Let me go back and show you how we can filter by year. So in grants, if I want to know, well, first of all, project period, you can sort by year there, ascending and descending. Also, anything that you see in this grid is filterable. So if you click on the filter and say, I want to filter by payment schedule, or let me see if I can even filter by project period that contains 2021. I just click on the plus. That would include everything that has a date that includes 2021. Kim, let me know if that answers your question or not. Okay. All right, perfect. All right, back to the slides. This kind of talks about the workflows associated with each of our program pathways. If you have questions about what you need to do as far as, do I need to do a reimbursement request on an MSP program, that will show here. It's pretty straightforward as far as which programs require an application. It's all of them with the exception of our MSP programs. Okay, this talks about workflows for our formula grants. So on our end, my team will do an upload with the allocations that are assigned to each LEA, and the system will auto-generate an invitation to apply for that program with the formula amount as it's been set up. You will receive an email. Actually, all users within the Utah Grant System for your LEA will receive an email inviting you to apply for that program. We're asking that you either apply or you waive the funding rather than just being silent. If you're not interested in receiving that funding, rather than just not applying, we ask that you go in and click on the waive button. And that gives us record and helps us as we're tracking down applications that are still pending. If your intent really is to not apply for that funding, we have record of that. So after the application has been received back at USBE, the grants manager and team will review that at the program level, send it back if they have any questions or concerns. After that, all of the questions have been answered. The grant becomes an award. The application becomes an award within the Utah Grant System. Okay, this talks about the main screens and dashboards, which we hit upon directly in the system. Oh, I did want to hit upon managing your organization profile and users. Let me just hit on that really quickly. So from the home screen, if you click on Manage Organization Profile on the left, this will show some key information regarding your LEA. So forgive me, I've got Jordan School District up, but this will be for each of your individual schools, LEAs. It will show all of your active and inactive users. Please go through this periodically and let us know if any of these users need to be inactivated within Utah Grants. We do pay a license fee per user, and right now we're doing fine as far as the number of licenses that we have, but we don't want to have that expense if we don't need it. So if you do have users within here, please send an email to me or to my team, and we'll make sure that we get that user inactivated within Utah Grants. Danny and team talked about indirect cost rates and negotiating indirect cost rates and submitting information in UPEFs. This is where that information ultimately resides within the Utah grant system. So we will transfer that information here into Utah grants so that if you are utilizing a fiscal year 2021 grant and it's state funded, typically that would be we would use an unrestricted indirect cost rate for those programs. And here are the rates that are associated with each of those years, fiscal years, whether they're restricted or unrestricted rates. So that's all maintained directly here in Utah grants. You can also come here to related logs, and this has some pretty cool ways to filter information. Also, you can see all of your active awards. You can see payment requests. It's an easy way to kind of see everything regarding your LEA right here. Management, we are in the process of turning on site visits, even if they're virtual, and risk assessments within the Utah grant system. You will find all of that documentation here, and we'll give you more information about those as they become available. But just so you know, those are here. Also, please.
Sorry, you may have responded to this when you're showing the emails, but Ryan has a question. Once a grant is awarded, can you send confirmation to others not controlling the grant, such as the budget director?
Okay, that's a great question. I don't have specific roles within Utah grants to say who is the budget director and send that notice to them. However, the award notification is going to the key POC, so the key point of contact within the agents within your LEA. It's also going to the approver and the application submitter. So it's going to potentially all three, unless any of those roles are shared. It's going to three individuals. That's who the email goes to. However, everybody who is in Utah grants can access that award, and you can see that there. So I will show you how you can actually see that award information directly in Utah grants. But unfortunately, I don't have the drill down to know who your budget director is. I just know approvers and creators and key POCs. Ryan, I hope that helps. Let me know if you want to give me more details on your question. Okay. Last year, or well, for this fiscal year, for the very first time, we have utilized Utah grants to collect our assurances. We will continue to do this every May, June, have to be submitted by June 30th, but we will have all of our assurances within Utah grants. If you ever need to go back and look at those assurances and what you've assured to, you can do that directly here in your organizational profile. Okay, let's cut over and just talk about who or how to see grant awards within Utah grants. So I popped over to grants, and on the left, I'm just clicking on View Active Awards and just picking one. Let's say I want to see my gear grant. And you can use any keyword, whatever works for you, as long as it's within the table, you'll be able to find it there. I use this search function all day long. Click on the eye to view more details. Okay, and this will actually give you everything that you need to know about that grant, including the budget as it's been set up in the application, any payment requests that have come through on that, any attachments. But the thing I really wanted to make sure that you saw here on the Overview tab is down below. So these are the three people, by the way, that, no, it's two of the three that received that letter. So in this case, John Larson, Kim Lloyd received the email saying your grant award is active. But anybody can come to this screen and see this active award. And this is actually the letter here at the bottom. So under award finite code, the letter is this blue hyperlink. Before I click on that, I wanted to show you John and his team, Brett's team talked about district program revenue codes quite a bit with the chart of accounts. You can actually see the district program and revenue codes that are associated with this grant right here on the overview screen. If you click on the actual letter, you get to see all of the details regarding that funding source. So this is your award document. All of that information is also here. So you'll see your district program revenue code, state codes, all within this letter. Okay. More dashboards. So on the applications page, you're going to see another dashboard for applications that are pending. This is a really easy way to keep track of applications that are still needing action. So if you hover over any of the pieces of this donut chart, you'll be able to see how many applications are within that status. So in this case, I was hovering over the blue created section. It shows me that there are 12 applications pending. If you click on that, you'll actually see the details of what is in the created status. What you'll be most interested in is those which are pending your approval, whereas the gray is with USBE, as is well, it looks like the green is also with you. So if it's a revision, so you'll want to pay attention to anything in this chart that's pending for you. Yes, Alan, you can only have one key point of contact. There's only one. Okay, so let me maybe show you how that works.
So Rebecca, in that
Utah
sense,
yes,
it would be challenging to, if the budget director is not the point of contact, then yeah, they can have access, but they wouldn't necessarily get emailed directly on it, right?
That's correct. That's correct. Okay, so showing how these dashboards work. Today, it looks like, let's see, this was Jordan School District has 11 applications in created status and 4 applications in review initiated status. An easy way to filter out to know what's in that created status is just to click on the actual dashboard, and it will show you a list. Sorry, I guess it doesn't scroll. It shows you a list of all of those applications that are in created status, and you can go directly to those by clicking on the eye from that dashboard. So again, a couple navigation pieces that are helpful. This is showing that you can click on the title within the tables to sort. On the monitoring, this is where you're going to do any of your payment requests. So make sure that you're paying attention to this dashboard as well, as far as anything that's pending or holding for a period of time that's not acceptable. We should definitely not be holding any payment requests more than a month. So really watch and make sure that you don't have anything old that's out there. If you do inadvertently create a payment request and it's still showing in here under your created payment requests, whoever created that payment request can go in and delete it if it was created in error. Also, the key point of contact can go in and delete payment requests that are in created status. So keeping these dashboards clean is a really great way to keep track of everything that's due from you. Grant summary report. I hope this is something that everybody is using. This is really a helpful tool. Let me actually go into that. So this little pie chart here is your analytics tab. And these are some basic standard reports that have been set up within Utah Grant System. So please use those. This is my favorite report. So the grant summary report, if I click on that on the left, will show me all of my grants for this LEA, the awarded amount, the total payments, any adjustments that have occurred, what's remaining, and if anything has been waived. So this is really a helpful report to get a glimpse. Sorry, it's not lined up perfectly, but the way that this was designed is to really be looking at it as an ad hoc report. So if I want to look, again, same program, 20 gear, I want to see where I am on my 20 gear grant and how I'm doing with spending on that. It looks like what was awarded was just shy of 2 million, but I have not requested any reimbursements on that grant. So please use this report. This is really helpful for you to keep track of what's remaining on each of your grants. Okay.
Rebecca,
And then, yes.
we're at time now.
Oh, perfect, because here's my contact info. So
Beautiful.
this is,
sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're perfect. You're great. This is how you could get a hold of my team. So I am not always the one answering the phone. I have a team of people that help. Tracy and Kelly are really awesome. If you get either of them on the phone, you're very lucky. But go ahead and give us a call or shoot us an email if you have any questions. So Ryan, give me a call directly. Let me know what you're looking for that you're missing, and I can walk you through how we can find that.
That's great. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Rebecca, thank you so much. I feel like we, maybe rushed. It's challenging to go through every detail for each of these areas. But I do want you all to know if you have questions or you would really like, a more extensive training, I'm sure, there's a lot more that Rebecca could review, kind of like the same with Dale and some of the budget stuff. And we don't want you to feel like this is the only training that will occur. We really want to connect and make sure that, you have an opportunity. If you want to do that individually or just get a few of you together, we can set that up and do something more extensive that might be more helpful. Or if you just have some individual questions like that, absolutely be sure to email us and we'll get a response to you to help you with your questions. And hopefully, in some of those cases, for example, with the point of contact, where we can, we will definitely do something to create more options. So Rebecca, thank you so much for your overview of the grant system. We'll go now to Karen McInnes for Pupil Accounting 101. Excited to have you present to us, Karen. We'll turn the time over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to segue into my slides from my presentation. And let me make sure I can get that up on the screen for all of you. Okay, shout out if anybody's having difficulty hearing me or seeing the screen, but I'll get started if I don't hear anything.
So far, so good, Karen.
Thank you so much. Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks so much for joining in today at this training session. And let me just say thank you to you and start by congratulating you in your new position or your newer position as a business administrator. I think that the opportunities like this, this training session are indicative of just the great relationship and communication that the USBE and the business administrators have to support our schools. It's really an opportunity. We're all in this together, and it's an opportunity for some great teamwork. So I'm Karen McInnes, and I do work with the USB School Finance group. And today I'm going to talk to you about pupil accounting, or actually what I like to call the data behind the dollars. I hope to provide you with just a basic understanding, since this is kind of considered a 101 level, and also talk about really what pupil accounting is and why it's important to you as a business administrator. We're going to look at some common definitions, terminology, rules, requirements, a few simple funding calculations, and also last but not least, I wanted to describe to you some of the pupil accounting monitoring and reporting activities that take place. Okay, so I think a good place for us to start is with a basic definition of pupil accounting. Pupil accounting can be thought of as in terms of both a structure and also a process. As a structure, it's designed to, as you can see on the slide, it's designed to provide for consistent, accurate collection and reporting of student data. And that is the student data that's used to determine the basic state funding levels and the distribution of financial resources for our schools. And then you can see as a process, it's concerned with the overall management of student data. And that is specifically the availability, usability, integrity, quality, and security of student data. And it's worth mentioning here that the best practices of pupil accounting are also aligned with the USBE's data governance plan, as well as the board's strategic goals, particularly those goals having to do with equity and with system values. Okay. So when we are applying the best practices of pupil accounting, what we're really doing is we're making good data-driven decisions. Data-driven funding requires teamwork on the part of both the LEAs and the USBE. And when both of us, both the LEAs and the USBE, are working together in compliance with the established pupil accounting rules, then we're really helping to ensure the quality of the data that will ultimately be used to fund our schools. So LEAs at the local level are primarily responsible for managing the collection and reporting of your student data. And at the USB level, at the state level, we are ultimately responsible for using LEA student data to determine the basic funding levels and the distribution of financial resources for our schools. Okay. There are several key pupil accounting reference materials, and these are both legal and technical, and these are important for you to know about. These resources are, links are available on our finance website to them, but these resources are updated on a regular basis. Just keep that in mind. These resources are updated in order to keep pace with changes in policy or to meet new legislative requirements. And I've listed some of the most important resources for you here, which include the Utah Code on the Minimum School Program, some important board rules, and an audit guide, and then also the UTREX technical specifications document. And we'll be talking a little bit more about all of these references later on. Of course, you should also keep in mind that you have additional resources on pupil accounting that are available at your LEA. And these include your locally approved policies and staff guidelines, which are not listed here, but they're equally important for you to know about. For instance, your local board may have adopted what's called a continuous enrollment measurement policy. Your local board will have adopted local attendance and truancy policies, or your LEA may have requested and been approved to have a school calendar waiver. Also, I'm sure that you also will have at your LEA some technical user handbooks that pertain to your student information system, your local student database system. So all of these materials should be and can be used as references for you. Pupil accounting, go to the next slide. Pupil accounting is important to the minimum school program, or MSP as we call it, because the largest share of the state's MSP funding is based on student counts. Dale did a great job describing to you a bit about how the minimum school program is organized in terms of budgeting. And MSP funding can be divided into 3 different program areas that Dale also described. There are the basic school programs, the related to basic school programs, and then the voted and board local levy programs. But for this discussion on pupil accounting, what you should know is that it's the basic school programs that make up the largest share of MSP funding, and these programs are based on student counts. Student counts are part of the one variable that all the basic programs have in common and use in their funding formulas. And that one common variable is what we call the weighted pupil unit, or WPU. And because WPUs are based in part on student counts, this is the way that the basic program costs are calculated or can be calculated on a uniform basis. As I've just said, while the number of WPUs is based on student counts, specifically, we'll get into it later on, student membership data, there's also the value of the WPU, which is determined by the state legislature during the general session each year. Okay, pupil accounting is used to determine the number of WPUs in the basic school programs. And the basic programs in MSP use these WPUs in what's called in simple terms, a prior year plus growth calculation. What prior year is referring to is actually the number of WPUs. So here's how the number of WPUs is calculated. First, total membership days for all students are reported by each LEA to the USBE at the end of the school year. And then the USBE divides the total membership days from each LEA by 180, which is the minimum number of school calendar days, to calculate average daily membership, or what we call ADM. So if you're following me, one student in ADM, in average daily membership, is counted as one WPU. And that's how we arrive at the number of WPUs. Next, growth. Growth refers to the percent change in enrollment. So first, what happens is total enrollment counts, or what we refer to often as the student head count as of October 1st, is reported by each LEA to the USBE for the current school year. And then USBE calculates growth by taking the October 1st enrollment count of the current year and dividing that by the October 1st enrollment count from the prior year, which gives us the resulting percent change in enrollment. Okay, in this slide and then the next slide I'm going to show you, I'm going to try to describe in more detail how total daily membership is determined by your LEA. Basically, the important part is that the important part to know is that the number of membership days for each student is not simply the total days that they're enrolled, but rather membership days accrue in part based on a student's individual schedule. So during the school year, daily membership is recorded by an LEA based in part on the actual amount of time or the number of periods the student was enrolled. And you can see in this table on this slide that for each of the 5 students listed, their schedules vary. Some are part-time and others are full-time. And likewise, you can see in the far right-hand column showing total membership days that the full-time students were able to earn a total maximum of the 180 days in the school year, whereas the other students earned a lesser number of days according to their particular part-time schedule. Then at the end of the year, for funding purposes, it's important for you to note that USBE calculates the LEA's total ADM by taking the aggregate number of total membership days for all students, part-time and full-time, and then dividing that by the total 180 days. So as an example, as a small example for just these 5 students, you can see that they have a total of 675 membership days. And so the ADM for these 5 would be equal to 3.750, which is also equal to the same number of WPUs. At the same time during the school year, a student's daily membership is also based in part on attendance. So again, daily membership that you submit to the USBE is not simply a count of the number of the days the student was enrolled. So it's also based in part on attendance. The table on this slide shows that for each student enrolled, the LEA keeps track of the number of consecutive days of unexcused absences for each student. And then if a student exceeds the number of unexcused absences that are allowed, those unexcused days will be deducted from the final number of membership days at the end of the year. And then once again, same as before, at the end of the year for funding purposes, USBE just collects those total 80 average daily membership or calculates that total average daily membership by taking the total aggregate number of LEA membership days, which in this example is 644 days for all of the 5 students. And we'll divide that by 180. And the result in this scenario is an ADM of 3.577, which again is the same as the number of WPUs. So the main takeaway from these 2 slides is to emphasize that daily membership is not just a matter of counting all the days a student is enrolled during the school year. Daily membership accrues based on each enrolled student's schedule and also in part on their attendance. And I hope that you can see in these examples that before the USBE calculates ADM, LEAs are really the front line of making sure that they're tracking each student's daily membership correctly.
Karen, there just is a question in the chat.
Sure.
Is the October 1st count used in the formula for anything other than growth? And we do have Jake here who might want to respond to it as well, but if you like, you can respond.
That is an excellent question, and it can be used for funding formulas for other programs. Right now, I'm just focusing on people accounting, the importance to the basic program, the largest source of funding to your LEA, and therefore how growth is calculated based on that for the WPU. But Jake might want to add to this in his presentation as well and talk about some of the other programs that use enrollment count or average daily membership for that matter in calculations.
Yeah, and I do think Jake will touch upon this question specifically, but what you mentioned is.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Good question or good point. Okay, so next, I just wanted to talk about the UTREX data clearinghouse. UTREX is an essential part of this pupil accounting system. Okay, UTREX is, as the slide shows, an automated system, and it's been designed to help the USB collect student data in a uniform basis or standardized basis from LEAs about individual students. And this student data is collected at specific times in the school year, which we'll talk about soon, to support the allocation of funds. It also, UTREX, of course, the student data is also used to support other accountability reporting and other types of funding outside of the basic WPU. LEAs are responsible for recording student data in their local student information systems, or what we call SISs. Examples of like SISs would be things such as PowerSchool, Aspire, Skyward that your LEAs use. And then your LEA submits their data from your SIS via UTREX. Of course, the USB also collects student data from LEAs via the UTREX system. So during the collection process, UTREX is serving as a system that's used to validate the data and to report student data for both the LEAs and the USBE. LEAs are actually required to submit student data to the USBE on a daily basis. And they'll check the validation of that data on a daily basis, and should be, so that they're keeping up the accuracy and quality of their student data on an ongoing basis. However, there are 3 important UTREX reporting deadlines during the year when, for lack of a better word, a snapshot is taken of the data, or it's captured, so that we at the USBE can use it for funding and other reporting purposes. The 3 reporting deadlines are end of the year or prior year student membership data that just talked about. And that has a final data submission deadline of July 7th. The October 1st student enrollment data, or that head count we talked about, has a final data submission deadline of October 10th. And then there's also a 3rd UTREX submission deadline of December 10th. Which is coming up. And that is important. However, for purposes of today's discussion, I haven't really focused or haven't focused necessarily on that data because it's not feeding into the WPU per se. But this UTREX data is submitted in December, and it's used for other funding programs for, as you can see here, preschoolers and some special education funding programs as well. Now, during these submissions, or in weeks prior to the submission, you should have already received a memo directed from our Assistant Superintendent of Operations, Scott Jones, to all of the business administrators, notifying them about this UTREX deadline and how important it is because these student counts are going to be used for funding. So finance on behalf, or Scott Jones on behalf of finance will send out these memos to all of you, notifying you about them, that they're coming up. And then your IT at the LEA level, your IT and your registrar or office staff are working very diligently to clear up any errors in their data. And they work together and they review the data and do some quality data checking, spot checking on the data to make sure this is accurate as possible before they finalize that submission. Okay, now I've kind of thrown up a little something fun I came across, I've held on to for quite a bit because it really is the gist of what pupil accounting is really what's most important about pupil accounting. So even though the UTREX system has made really advanced technical features and business rules that are programmed or built into the system to help both the USBE and LEAs validate the accuracy of the student data, pupil accounting best practices require additional oversight and compliance monitoring to ensure that the rules are being applied accurately at the school level. And what that means is we need to make sure that at the point where there's a human input and the staff at the school level are interpreting the rules and system requirements, and at the same time they're recording the actual daily student data on the local student information system, we want to make sure that that process, that point in the system is as accurate as possible. So simply put, we can only expect to get the same quality of student data from UTREX that's been recorded by the LEAs or the schools in your local information system. It's the old data in and data out kind of, analogy. So to address the need for oversight and compliance monitoring by both the LEA and the USBE working together to ensure that pupil accounting rules are being applied accurately at that point of human input, the board rules on pupil accounting require that LEAs contract with an independent CPA firm annually to identify sources of errors in recording and reporting non-fiscal data, which means student data, for the purpose of making continuous improvements to the quality of student accounting systems. Okay, so as a result, independent CPAs contracted by each LEA conduct agreed upon procedures engagements, or simply AUPs, at 2 specific times during the year. And many of you, since you've already begun your work as a business administrator, have contracted with the independent CPA firms and are aware of these reports that are sent both to you, the LEA, to you, and also to the USBE. Agreed upon procedures engagements, many of you may already know, they're basically designed to test a sample of each school's student records for compliance, and then to report those results as statements of fact. In other words, they're designed to simply identify where there are exceptions to the pupil accounting rules. And the AUP engagements don't offer any other opinions or interpretation on any other accounting matters outside of what the procedures specify, okay? So the procedures are officially published in the Guide for Agreed Upon Procedure Engagements for Local Education Agencies and Community-Based Organizations, which is a mouthful. So it's often just simply referred to as the Legal Compliance Guide. The USBE in school finance determines the actual procedures that are to be used by the CPA firms, and annual updates to these procedures are then posted on the Office of the State Auditor's website. The deadline for CPAs to submit the AUP report on LEA year-end aggregate student membership is this September 15th. And the deadline to submit the report on LEA fall enrollment count and transfer student documentation is November 1st. So for student membership, this audit report, if you will, or AUP report follows the UTREX year-end submission. And for fall enrollment due on November 1st, that follows the UTREX submission deadline for your student data on enrollment. both you at the LEA and also finance at the USBE review these reports from the CPA firms. And we determine, based on our review of them, where additional training on pupil accounting rules and requirements is needed for your school staff who are responsible for recording your student data. Okay. Now, for the remainder of my presentation, I just want to go through the basic pupil accounting rules that the CPA firms will be checking compliance for when they're testing that sample of your student records during the agreed upon procedures engagements. Okay, the first rule is dealing with school calendars. And really what this rule states is that schools are required to provide for a minimum of 990 instructional hours and 180 school days. When local boards approve their schools' calendars, they're allowed to include a certain number of school days for professional development, for parent-teacher conferences, kindergarten assessment, and even a snow day for emergencies. So you can see how there's more than just pure instructional days that qualify as that 180. Also, for individual students, there's certain allowances for them to be released during the school day, but they can still be counted in membership for that day. For that period. For instance, a student may be allowed a release period for religious instruction, or according to the rules, they're allowed the time that he or she would need to travel to another campus to receive CTE instruction. Okay, now there are a few exceptions to the 180-day rule. And let me start out by talking about how the 180-day rule applies normally at the student level. So students receiving regular instruction, okay, or those receiving a combination of regular and special ed self-contained are allowed no more than 180 days membership in one school calendar year. But students who are receiving both regular and resource special ed instruction are allowed no more than 360 days, which basically equates to 180 days for regular and 180 days for resource instruction. The 180-day minimum requirement applies to students even if they're enrolled in more than one LEA during the year. And by rule, students are allowed to enroll in more than one LEA simultaneously. So they would have part-time at one school and part-time at the other school, or the other LEA, and then at the end of the year, their daily membership cannot exceed 180 for the combined enrollments. Now, exceptions to the 180-day minimum calendar day requirements would be for those students who have an approved early graduation plan on file. And for those students, they are allowed more than 180 days. And also there's an exception to the 180 calendar days that allows extra days for students that transfer during the school year between one or more LEAs. And that allows them time for that transfer and all the records to be exchanged. And usually it equates to about a 10-day period, a couple of weeks extra that are allowed over the 180 days. The next rule that I wanted to talk about is one that I already mentioned earlier when I was showing you how daily membership is calculated. And remember I mentioned that the daily membership accrues in part for each student according to a student's schedule, full or part-time. Well, during the AUP engagements, CPA firms will test a sample of student records at a school to make sure that if a student is enrolled for only part of the day or part of the year, then that student's membership needs to reflect the actual amount of time that the student was enrolled in relation to what a full-time student normally would have been enrolled. So this is a test that the CPA firms do to check for what's called part-time proration of membership. Okay, During the AUP engagements, one of the required procedures are for CPA firms to compare total membership days for each student recorded on the local school SIS system with the total membership days that were reported on UTREX. So CPAs must report when there's a difference, and they're asked to explain the difference when possible. So there are several reasons why the difference actually could be justified. And that's because there are certain student records that are counted on the local SIS, but when they're submitted via UTREX to the USBE, they're excluded from the student counts that are used in funding. So I've listed these record exceptions here in this slide, and basically these are student records marked as special ed or YIC times C. And what that means is this is where the student is receiving over a certain number of minutes of special ed or YIC services, and there's a different funding for those students, not through the basic WPU. Also, records where the field school of record has been marked as equal to N or no. These are records where the student is taking a course at this school, but it's not their primary school of enrollment. Also excluded are records for preschool students, for private school students or homeschool students, for foreign exchange students or out-of-state students. And finally, if a record, this is kind of a technical detail, but if a record that's being validated when the LEA is submitting the data to the USBE and it's receiving what's considered to be a fatal error, then it's going to be excluded and not in the counts for funding purposes. So that's why there's such a tension and cooperation between the USBEs and the LEAs and the USBE during that 2 weeks before the final submission to make sure all these errors are cleared out. Okay, so for these students excluded, it's not that they're not going to be funded, it's that they're just funded through other programs rather than through the basic MSP or WPU-based programs, if that makes sense.
Karen, just to let you know, we're at 11:17. Just have to kind of wind it down. I hate to interrupt the flow. It's a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much, Patrick. Okay, I've got about three more slides. Okay, here we go. Okay, the next basic pupil accounting rule is once again a rule that I already mentioned earlier when I was talking about the daily membership calculation. Okay, I not only mentioned that daily membership accrues in part for each student according to the student's full or part-time schedule, but also I mentioned that daily membership accrues for each student according to a student's attendance, specifically whether that student has received more than the allowable consecutive excused absences. So during the AUP engagements, the CPA firms will test a sample of the student records at a school to make sure that according to the 10-day rule or according to the local board approved policies on continuous enrollment measurement, each student who has unexcused absences over the allowable amount has actually stopped generating membership starting the next school day following those absences. So Board Rule 277419 on pupil accounting has a lot more details on the requirements for local continuous enrollment measurement policies. But basically these policies, rather than the traditional 10-day rule, are used by virtual schools or schools offering online courses, or they're used by schools with other types of what we call learner-based instruction and attendance taking, such as competency-based and other blended instructional models. Okay, the next basic pupil accounting rule that CPAs will check compliance for involves student exit codes. While membership days accrue and will be accounted for between the entry and the exit date for each student, exit codes are used to indicate the reason that the student left a school. Not the date, but the reason. The legal compliance guide for AUPs on transfer students requires CPA firms to test whether or not a transfer student's exit code has been recorded accurately. And the reason that the accuracy of exit codes, or the reason the student left, is important is because these codes affect accountability reporting, specifically reporting on graduation and dropout rates. So they've been included in these pupil accounting AUP engagements. The slide lists the specific exit codes that are included in the or outlined in the procedures as the sample of records that will be tested. So the sample is only going to include students in grades 9 through 12. And if no students in the sample meet the exit code criteria that are listed here, or for many of our charter schools that only serve elementary students, these AUP procedures do not apply. Okay, my final slide. The last and most important general rule that applies to all of pupil accounting, all of data input really, but we're talking about pupil accounting here, is for LEAs to maintain sufficient supporting documentation on their student records. So whether CPAs are checking the accuracy of student entry or exit dates, whether they're checking student residency in Utah, or whether they were properly marked as part-time according to their schedule, LEAs must keep supporting documentation to support the way that a student's data was recorded. Just like keeping your expenditure receipts in, when you file your taxes for deductions. Supporting documentation is considered the same thing as official student records, and official student records must be in writing. Or in the case of storing them digitally, you must at least be able to reproduce them in writing to be able to show the auditors. So at any rate, I've listed here some examples of what official records are. That would be enrollment, registration, and withdrawal forms, emails, memos, and letters, transcript requests, homeschool affidavits, education plans, whether that be an individualized education plan or a continuous enrollment measurement, or a early graduation plan. What it does not include is just somebody stating verbally that they had a conversation with the parent that the student was moving out of the country. That will not qualify or validate the exit code or the entry date or the exit date, for instance. Okay, so I'm afraid that might have been a lot more than what you expected as a 101 level presentation. So I'm sure you have, or you might have questions in the future. So please feel free to contact me anytime. Again, I really value the relationship and the great communications that we all have together and in our work on behalf of the schools and the students. And yeah, I think that in the future, most of the time, the best way that we're going to be able to gain a better understanding is when we just ask questions about real life issues as they come up or as they come into play. So thank you so much for your participation today, and I'm really looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, Kieran. Appreciate that. We do have a question from Hayden related to the waiver for the 90-hour requirement that the board did back in. Did they do in April or was it in March? I will be reviewing that in our meeting this afternoon. I don't know if Jake's going to go over that, but can you just put that in a nutshell real quick, what that waiver was related to?
All right, there were a couple of waivers. There was a waiver for last school year. And basically, I think from the period of March through the end of the school year. And then there was also another waiver for this school year. The waiver required, I think, a request on the part of the LEA for a, from the USBE for, but it also allowed for, I believe, 2 extra days to be counted. I don't know if it was in addition to the professional development days that are already allowed, but there were 2 extra days that were also approved that LEAs could take when they set their calendars. So I'm sorry, that probably doesn't answer exactly the question, but I hope maybe Patrick, when you'll be talking about that, maybe.
Yeah, I will discuss it a bit this afternoon. What we'll do is we'll send the link over to that waiver specifically.
Yeah.
Any questions, we can go over that with you. Jake might touch upon that a little bit in his presentation. But I would like to get over to him. He only has about 20 minutes left, so we want to get him some time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kieran. Really appreciate a wonderful presentation and very informative. Jake, we'll get over to you so that you can share your presentation now, sir.
Okay, thanks,
So
Patrick.
Jacob Howe-Trow, our MSP administrator, we'll turn the time over to you.
Okay, sharing my screen. Could you confirm to me, Patrick, if the presentation slides are showing correct?
Yeah, that's coming up. The slideshow is working.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Kieran, also thank you for the great presentation. That's great information and material that you gave there. So yeah, just the MSP 101, I'll try and blaze through as many of these slides as I can while providing good information. A little bit short on time, but small introduction for myself. I've been with the state board coming up on about 1.5 years. Before that, I was a senior auditor at the state auditor's office. So I've been with the state for a number of years. But jumping into the presentation now. So the minimum school program, a bit of a history lesson, was created in 1931 by the legislature to meet the constitutional mandate. The current iteration of the minimum school program was created in the early 70s, and that was a result of the movement toward a more equitable society as far as education goes, and I guess in general. One of the most important statutes as it relates to the minimum school program is 53F-2-103. And in there you can find several of the purposes of MSP, 3 of which I've listed here are maybe the most important parts of that code. Provide a minimum school program for the state in accordance with the constitutional mandate. Recognize that all children of the state are entitled to reasonably equal educational opportunities. That's regardless of socioeconomic background or location as far as residency goes. And school districts participate on a partnership basis in the payment of the cost of the minimum school program. It's not just solely state funded. It also recognized that each locality, and this relates to that district share of funding, that each locality should be empowered to provide educational facilities and opportunities beyond the minimum school program, and accordingly provide a method whereby the latitude of action is permitted and encouraged. And really the local revenues that are raised in each county and district really play into this goal. This chart I prepared shows a funding split between the local funding and the state funding for only the basic school program. So that's the above the line programs, the quote unquote WPU programs. So 17% of the cost is shared by the districts themselves, and 83% are state appropriated funds. How districts pay for these their share of the MSP is through the combined minimum basic rate, and that is set at 16.28 increments for tax year 2020, which relates to fiscal year 2021. The combined minimum basic rate is made up of 3 parts. The greater of either the minimum basic rate or a rate floor of 16 increments. The WPU value rate, which is assessed for fiscal year 2021, and that WPU value rate is the difference between 16 increments and to raise it to the additional 0.28 there that you can see. And then also the equity pupil tax rate, which is the difference between the floor of 16 increments and the minimum basic rate, which is calculated to be lower than 16 increments. A few other sources of local revenue would be the voted and board programs, as well as the charter local levy. The charter local levy goes into the charter school local replacement. It helps fund that program, and the districts pay their share also into that program. And those all vary by district, as you can see. The weighted pupil units kind of been talked about quite a bit already, but They're the funds for Utah's regular basic school programs and are distributed to school districts using the prior year ADM plus growth model that Kieran went over. The WPU value for fiscal year 21 is set at $3,596. And that, so essentially the WPU value acts as a multiplier. So you multiply the number of WPUs generated by the statutory formula in a given program and multiply that by the WPU value rate. And there you have the total funding in that program for a given LEA. Average daily membership for charter schools is prorated using the following weighting metrics: 0.9 for grades 1 through 6, 0.99 for grades 7 through 8, and 1.2 for grades 1 through 12. For both districts and charters, the kindergarten students' ADM is prorated at 0.55. This is because the kindergarten program is usually a half-day program and is optional. District students grades 1 through 12 ADM is converted to WPUs on a one-to-one basis, but you also have to remember to factor in growth in the calculation. And I'll get more into that when we look quickly at the example that I've prepared. Dale showed this little graphic here during his presentation. It shows the regular basic school programs. I did not include a graphic for the restricted, it shows both the regular and restricted basic school programs, but I did not include a graphic for the below the line program. So these are all the above the line programs, again, paid via WPU. And they include kindergarten grades 1 through 12, necessarily existent small schools, pro staff, and administrative costs. That administrative cost was cut to a zero funding level for fiscal year 21. And the money generated by these programs can be used for maintenance and operation expenses as determined. So these are the unrestricted. NES is a little bit tricky because the funds are restricted to the particular small school that generated those funds. I'll skip this one, I'll go straight into the example here. See if I can exit out of this. And we'll look at how the K through 12 programs are funded using the prior year plus growth model. I'm not sure if this, here we go. So this is a district example that I will take a look at here and review with you. So what it does is takes the ADM from school year 2020 and applies the growth. The growth is calculated as the change in October 1 counts from prior year and current year. That is calculated here. So you can see the October 1 counts, the change calculated. This is the growth. We'll multiply the ADM times this percentage equals the growth, I should say. So you take the prior year ADM for kindergarten, it's weighted at 0.55 if you remember. As you can see, 444 ADM multiplied by the weighting factor of 0.55. This is prior year ADM in this column H, and this is where the growth is applied, which would be prior year ADM plus prior year ADM times the change in the October 1 counts. And that would be the WPUs for fiscal year 21 for this district. The same calculation is used for grades 1 through 12 ADM, except there's no weighting factor. And as far as charter schools go, it's the exact same formula, just broken out a little bit more by the respective grade bands and their weighting factors. Are there any questions as it relates to this funding formula? I know it can be slightly tricky if you don't have no experience with it. I'm happy to answer those either now or at a later time. And if not, we can jump back into the presentation.
Jake, there is one question.
I brought it up here,
okay.
Patrick. So it's from Jackie Allred. Is there a hold factor in the change from October 1? I'm glad you brought that up. The hold harmless essentially means that we hold an LEA harmless to prior year ADM if the growth, the change in, if the growth is negative, meaning the change in October 1 counts. So we would simply, if the total K through 12 WPUs was fewer in this column for FY 2021, we would hold you harmless to the FY 2020 20 WPUs, which are correspond 1-to-1 to the average daily membership. So I hope that makes sense. So yes, there is the hold harmless in the K through 12 programs. Another question from Tyler Newton. So a decline for multiple years means the ADM will revert to what it was recorded as 2 years prior. No, the ADM is always on a rolling basis. The hold harmless drops off from year to year. I hope that answers the question. And I guess I'm going to jump back in the slide. Sorry, one moment here. Find my presentation. Patrick, is the screen sharing properly? I'm getting kind of a few weird.
It is, yeah, Jake.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to go through that in such a rushed manner. It's just we are somewhat low on time here. I'll continue to go through a few of the programs in the regular basic program. Necessary existence small schools, I covered this somewhat already, but the additional WPUs are generated using the ADM that are, the WPUs are determined by the distribution formula as dependent upon ADM per school. I've included a couple of references, statutory references. In my backup, I shared with you a code rule funding worksheet or spreadsheet that lists the codes, the programs and their respective codes and administrative rules. I hope you find that helpful. I would suggest reviewing it to gain a better understanding of each program. Professional staff, under pro staff cost formula, additional WPUs are allowed for licensed staff training and experience. The WPUs for this program are generated from by using a pro staff ratio multiplied by the number of K through 12 WPUs and necessarily existent small school WPUs. So that's how we arrive at funding for professional staff. Briefly going to list the restricted basic school programs. So you have all your special education programs, CTE add-on, and class size reduction, which is driven by kindergarten through grades 8, October 1 counts, and average daily membership. Again, these are more restricted for in their uses. I'm going to jump ahead a couple slides here. I would like to talk about special ed add-on formula a little bit. So SPED add-on is funded essentially with a delay of 2 years. There's been talk in the past by the legislature to update the formula so or essentially get rid of this lag in some way. But FY21, for example, is funded based on the FY19 ADM, and the FY20 ADM will fund the FY22 special education add-on. That's barring any sort of legislative changes to the funding formulas. It also establishes a foundation of average daily membership over the previous 5 years, using the previous 5 years average daily memberships, and new LEAs with less than 5 years in existence. Their foundation is based on the average number of years the LEA has been in operation. Class size reduction, I get a few questions about how this program, what it exactly does and how the funds are utilized. Each district shall use 50% of its allocation to reduce class sizes in any one or all of grades K through 8, with an emphasis on improved reading skills. I think it's kind of important to know that the option to petition the state board to increase the ways in which these funds can be used is available, and that's given if a district's average class size is below 18 in grades K through 8. I'm going to skip ahead to a little bit about related to basic programs. Each of the appropriations are related to a specific purpose in the related to basic programs, or below the line as we call them, and they're not funded by WPUs. However, some of these programs are WPU dependent in how the funding is allocated. I can think of a couple off the top of my head: early literacy, so K through 3 reading, as well as the voted and board programs for districts. In the past, flexible allocation was based on the number of WPUs generated in the above the line programs to allocate funds. And again, I would reference that code rule spreadsheet for more guidance on the related to basic programs and exactly how many there are and what they do. Well, how are we doing on time? About 5 minutes left.
Jake, quick question. I don't know
Yes,
if you,
please.
but can we find these funding formulas on the USOE website anywhere?
I don't think they are on our website. The funding formulas are in code. I'm trying to think of if there's any helpful tools. I've seen a few correspondence that relates to the K through 12 WPUs and that calculation. I'm not sure exactly where they are on the website though, so I can get back to you on that. If you, whoever asked the question, please email me and I can help you go through those if you have any more questions. I'm gonna jump ahead. In fact, I'm gonna stop presenting here, at least might stop my slideshow. I want to show you the allotment memos quickly, just so we're all on the same page there. Monthly, we, of course, distribute the MSP funding via Utah grants. And I just want to show you where I post those allotment memos and what those look like in case you haven't seen those. So in the financial operations section of the USBE website, we have this monthly allotment memo section. I email these out on a monthly basis once payments have been processed and finalized. And I also have put in a ticket to have them posted on the website. But it lists by LEA what the revenues are for the given month. So this would be November's, the most recent payment. It lists the program, the coding that you should use on a charter or district level, the amount paid in the month in the current month column, and the current budget for the entire fiscal year. Of course, this can change dependent upon new updates to enrollment counts and or other data. But if you ever have a question on the allotment memo, I distribute these monthly and can help you reconcile if you're having any problems there or understanding exactly what the funds are and so forth. But the MSP block is here, and it lists by program how much a LEA has received. I think we have a question. That's a great question from Marion Florence. Why does the allotment memo have all the FY20 data? Can it just reflect current budget amounts? I do realize that it does get a little bit cluttered. This is a report that is generated from state finance. So I generated off the state finance website. I do some formatting and then I reconcile. The problem with excluding the 20 programs right now is that there are some 20 programs, not necessarily in MSP, but some fiscal year 20 programs for which there are still distributions being made, meaning those programs have not been closed out. So in FY20, there was a lot of FY19 data. Sorry, I just got a question came up. For FY20, there's a lot of FY19 programs on the allotment memo. We eliminated those FY19 programs near the end of FY20 to kind of clear up the board here. I expect we will do a similar process for fiscal year 21. Once we near the end of the fiscal year, we'll have to change some of the coding in our accounting system, and then the FY20 programs will be eliminated. But for the most part, you should be looking at programs that start with 21 for FY21. But of course, there may sometimes be distributions on those FY20 programs. Again, not necessarily an MSP. There's a special education program, 20 SIG F, that had a distribution for this LEA, a payment. So just be on the lookout for those. But in simple terms, yes, we do plan on cleaning up the allotment memo report in a few months' time. I believe I'm pretty much out of time. Are there any final questions? Again, I apologize for having to kind of rush through this, but please feel free to email me any questions that you have regarding the minimum school program or payments. I'm always there to help the LEAs and the business administrators out in regards to that. But if there's no further questions, I'll turn the time over to Patrick Lee, School Finance Director, to close us out.
Thanks, Jake. One other quick question. Why is the program short code listed twice in the description? Is that, I'm guessing, to what you're just sharing on the allotment memo?
I'm looking, I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Ryan, we'll double check with you and follow up to make sure we understand your question there, so we can get you an answer on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a look at it.
All right, thank you, Jake. Appreciate your presentation. Yeah, we do have to wrap things up. We have our afternoon finance training starting up at noon. Not much time, I know, so I hope to see a lot of you, if not all of you, there. It's a busy day, obviously, but we do appreciate your time that you've taken with us for this training. As I mentioned before, we will have some follow-up training, especially key areas that we've identified from here and in other meetings that we have where we see a need. So we hope all the best for you and your work, and we're looking forward to working with you throughout the rest of this fiscal year and moving forward. So thank you all again for attending, and we will hope to see you at our afternoon training. Take care.